Oh, so we're missing a counselor.
He's out there. He's here.
Working the crowd.
It's primary season, he's working the
Is
crowd.
it an election year?
Good election.
As a matter of fact, it is.
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The hour is 7 o'clock. As mayor, I hereby call to order a meeting of the Laconia City Council scheduled for February 11, 2019 at this hour. As always, we'll begin our meeting tonight with a salute to our American flag. I would ask that you please rise and join Councilor David Bounds in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll note for the record that the minutes to tonight's meeting
the word.
are being kept by City Clerk Cheryl Hebert, and I would ask that she please call the roll.
Counselor Cheney,
Here.
Counselor Bounds,
Present.
Counselor Littman,
Also present.
Counselor Haynes,
Here.
Counselor Hamel,
Present.
Counselor Hosmer,
Here.
Oh,
Mayor England.
man, the pressure is on. I think I went with here last time we had a tie vote, so I'm going to vote present tonight.
I just want you to know that's the first time I ever said
Ever?
present. Ever.
Brenda will be very
And
happy.
I'm never going to do it again.
All right, thank you. Let the record show that all 6 councilors are present tonight and that a quorum has been established for this meeting. We'll also note for the record that the council is joined at the head table tonight by City Manager Scott Myers and by the City Finance Director Glenn Smith. First order of regular business is acceptance of minutes from previous meeting. You have before you tonight, councilors, the minutes from our meeting on January 28th. They were distributed 2 days later by the clerk on January 30th. No corrections or changes were submitted before this meeting. Unless there are any at this time, I'm going to declare that the minutes to the January 28, 2019 meeting are accepted as presented by the clerk. We have no consent and action items tonight, so we are at citizen comments. This is the appropriate time on our agenda tonight for anyone who is with us who wishes to address the council on any matter that is not on tonight's agenda. Does anyone meet that criteria? Want to talk to the council about any matter that is not on tonight's agenda? No? Okay, interviews. I suspect many of you in the audience are here tonight for interviews, of which we have a number scheduled. And I will say as a preface to this that as a matter of council rule and policy, we interview candidates for various boards and commissions at the first meeting of a given month, and we vote on those nominations at the following meeting, the second meeting of the month. Okay, so we do not vote on these tonight. Simply conduct the interviews. We'll do the voting at the next meeting. You are welcome to attend the next meeting if you like, but it is not necessary, and typically applicants do not do so. Okay, so I see a lot of familiar faces, a lot of great public servants in our audience tonight, and we're going to get started with certainly not the least of those, Linda Perry. Linda is seeking reappointment as a regular member of the Putnam Fund Board for another 5-year term expiring at the end of March 2024. Welcome,
Yes.
Linda. Mm-hmm. And if you could just, for the record, tell us what ward you live in and give us an idea of why you would like to be reappointed, please.
Ward 6, 159 Franklin Street. I've been there for 42 years. I'm a lifelong resident of Laconia. And I'd like to stay on the Putnam Fund Board. I think I hit my 20-year mark last year, to continue the work that we do. I mean, the fund is a valuable asset to the city of Laconia, and we bring some really great programs to Laconia. The 5 of us on the board get along quite well. We have diverse talents that we all bring, and always looking for something new that we can bring here.
Okay, any questions or comments for Mrs. Perry?
I have a comment.
Counselor Hamel had his hand up first. Can I
Okay,
go
go.
to him, please? Counselor Hamel.
No, go.
Counselor Hamel.
I just want to thank Linda for all her years of service. She's been a real asset to the city and to this organization, and all the great shows that they work together with to bring to Laconia. It's been really nice, and thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Bob.
Counselor Bounds.
I echo those comments, and I don't mean to age myself, but James McBride was my high school teacher for English, and I see you work for him.
I did. I was his secretary.
Yeah.
In fact, when the Putnam Fund was getting off the ground. And I distinctly remember when the Roots miniseries was on TV, we brought Alex Haley to Laconia. And I had the opportunity to meet him, and he autographed a book for me. And that was one of my first memories of the Putnam Fund and the impact it has on our city.
Well, Mr. McBride made a huge impression on me and a lot of other students in his English class, to the extent that some of us can still recite Chaucer's Canterbury Tales and the Lord's Prayer in Old English.
Oh, we should schedule a special meeting just for that.
It wasn't easy being his secretary either.
I'll bet.
He corrected the literature with a red pen.
Anyone else? All right, I think they echoed all our sentiments exactly, and we very much appreciate you and all the other members of the Putnam Board. Thank you.
Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, we switch gears to the Library Board of Trustees, and we have Aaron Bassett. Aaron, welcome. He is seeking reappointment as a regular member of the Library Board of Trustees for another 3-year term, which would expire in 2022.
Yes, hello. I'm Aaron Bassett. I'm in Ward 4 over on Fenton Ave. I've been there for about a decade. And a little correction, I've only served a year. I was filling in for the end of another term, so this will be my first 3-year
This
term.
will be your first full term.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
I came onto the board, I have a background in technology, and I came on the board thinking to help the library with that, and it turns out we've had a lot of technology work to do this year, so I think that's been going well, and I'd hope to continue that work.
Any questions for Mr. Bassett? Counselor
Just
Bounds.
Thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
Thanks a
welcome.
lot. Thank you.
Okay, I guess not. Thank you for coming
Thank
tonight. All right, John Moriarty, is he here? Yes, he is. John is seeking reappointment as a regular member of the Library Board of Trustees for another 3-year term, expiring in 2022. And I think, counselors, you are all aware that Mr. Moriarty is the current chairman of the Library Board of Trustees.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and councilors. Thank you for your time this evening. And Mr. Smith, welcome home. It's nice to see you here at the table again. Obviously, I have a certain degree of passion about the way the library fits into democracy and into our community. And I certainly don't want to abuse your time, but I did just want to touch on a few things. Number one, of course, you are aware that we have a total of, I guess would be 8 sitting trustees. There are 6 appointed by you, 7 if you include the alternate. Bruce Knur has been serving for a couple of years now in 1-year terms, and of course the designee of the superintendent of schools. So we have a really good group that works together and a diverse set of skills. And I just, in case you see people out in the community, sometimes I think it's nice to have one succinct summary on that. So you probably are aware that Marie Bradley serves as our vice chair. She was the city manager's personal assistant for I don't know how many years, and she's a wonderful addition to the board. Attorney Kim Denosi serves as our secretary, and she's also part of the endowment committee, and she has a fantastic sense of numbers and a wonderful set of experiences, so it's great to have her input in that capacity. She's got a great sense of numbers, and of course, Ole Anderson, if you can say anything about him, is that he has not only a great sense of numbers, but a great sense of common sense. So it's terrific to have those officers. John Purley, who's a retired bank president, still serves as a president of a bank in New York State, is our endowment committee chairperson. We would be lost without his stewardship for sure. And of course, Aaron Bassett. Aaron, I don't want to frighten you, but I was roughly your age when I joined the Board of Trustees, so I hope you're in for the long haul. And Aaron serves as a reminder of the different demographics that we serve, so it's a good board. Bruce Knauer, you'll hear from tonight, and I'll let him tell you about his accomplishments, but it's really helpful to have someone at the table always to go to with questions about proper protocol and procedure. And of course, Liz Rosenfeld, who you bestowed an award on recently for her work with robotics, is an integral part of our robotics effort at the library. So those are the trustees. I'm happy to be a part of them. It's a great group. It's one of the most fun committees and boards that I've been a part of. Laconia Library, I'm really pleased to say, is safe, clean, and useful. Just a couple of quick shout-outs here. I hate to say that the library is safer because it implies that it wasn't safe before, and that's simply not true. But in terms of it feeling safer, I want to tell you that we did have Chief Canfield come in sometime in the last 3 years. And I don't know exactly what he did, but we've had a much diminished need for law enforcement because law enforcement, the human element is there. There is no substitute for that, and we're really grateful for that. And just in terms of the building being clean, we do need to spend some money and time and attention on the children's room. It needs a little refreshing, soft seating, etc. And I hope we can accomplish that. Just one more shout out there. The other day, you may have heard we had a little water infiltration with the rain, and we were all slogging around in our boots in the electrical room with 600 amps of three-phase power. It's a good combination, water and power. And who was there, the first one asking for a shovel, but Kevin Dunleavy, his director, was the first guy out there with a shovel. So thank you to Kevin, too. And then, of course, useful. We spend about $7,000 a year on programs, as we'll talk about in the budget season. But that works out, given the number of programs we have, to about $2 per person per program. I think it's roughly 500 programs a year, including story time and the people we bring in. So it's a busy, active, used library. By the way, Daniel Webster's story, I forget the name of it, but The Mighty Daniel Webster is the 21st. It should be a good program. Please join us. So that's pretty much what's going on. I mean, we are updating our ILS system. Aaron's an active part of that. When we first did that in 2001, Dan McKeever issued us $140,000 to do that. We hope to replace it for $15,000 now, so it's a change in times, and it sort of vignettes what it is that we need to accomplish and why it needs upgrading. But it's a good group of people. It's a vital service to the community. Thank you for understanding that and indulging me tonight. I appreciate your considerations and be happy to field any questions.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Moriarty? No? Again, well, thank you, John, for your service very much. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Okay. And still on the subject of libraries, old friend Bruce Knauer is with us tonight. I see in the back there. Bruce is seeking reappointment as an alternate member of the Library Board of Trustees for a one-year term. Alternates 1 year at a time? Is that what you were just here? 1 year at a time?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, good evening. To the council, good evening. It's been my privilege to be able to contribute in this manner. As I said to John, I'm very comfortable in this role, 1 year at a time. I am normally at all the meetings, and I do that, one, because I really enjoy the library, but two, I know how valuable it is to have a quorum, and I want to be able to contribute by being there, to be the utility infielder, as it were. It has been very interesting 2 years, and I hope that the council would allow me the privilege of serving again and helping John and the rest of the trustees with the variety of issues and the good challenges ahead.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Knauer? Councilor Lippman.
Hey, Bruce, thanks for serving again. In terms of the challenges or the opportunities that you most engaged you over the past couple of years, what would those be?
Moving a library into the future comes with a great tradition, as most libraries do, in the face of technology challenges, demographics, and finding even more ways, I suppose, to encourage the citizens of Laconia to avail themselves of all that the city has in the past and continues to give to them in the library. So be creative, but to very much respect the tradition and the investment that's already been made. So.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Canor? Okay, thank you, Bruce. Thanks for coming tonight. Appreciate it. Appreciate your service. Well, this is like a hit parade, a Hall of Fame list here tonight in front of us. Peggy Selig is next. Welcome, Peggy. Seeking reappointment as a regular member of the trustees of the trust fund for a 3-year term expiring in 2022.
Right, and I live in Ward 3, if you want to know. I filled...
Choice.
Thank you. The remainder of a term, so that I had a 2-year term, and this will be my first 3-year term. It's been a learning experience for me, and we've been short a member. There were just 2 of us, John Nivas and myself, and then the meeting we had last month, Randy Haas has joined the trustee of the trust fund. So we have a full complement, and you know, it's been very interesting. We watch the budgets. We meet with the citizens, people from Citizens Bank when they come up that handle the finances and the investments. And we meet quarterly we've changed it from a morning meeting to an afternoon meeting at 2 o'clock in the afternoon because it seems to work better for our financial people and I think for John also. But it has been a learning experience. I am the secretary by default, so you get to see my minutes on a quarterly basis. And I don't know if you have any questions for me.
Questions or comments for Mrs. Selig?
Thank you.
All right, well, needless to say, we thank you.
You're welcome.
And thanks for
Thank
coming
you. Good.
tonight. Another familiar name and face is next up, Dorothy Duffy. Dorothy is seeking reappointment as a regular member of the Heritage Commission for a 3-year term expiring in 2022.
Good evening. Presently, I've served for 10 years on the Heritage Commission. I was one of the people with Fred Toll that pushed and pushed for it, and we finally got it. Then we had quite a problem completing a panel for the board. If you actually appoint me, that means I got to live another 3 years, so remember, I may be at this podium again. I love working on the Heritage Commission, but I will admit, too, it's quite frustrating because it's not quite taken as serious as I would like to have it taken. It delights me when any building or dwelling in the community refurbishes and puts it to new reuse. You're keeping the old and you're satisfying the need for the present, and I think you're planning into the future. Sometimes I think the future becomes more important than the past, and so that is one of the issues I do have. The board is made up of very nostalgic ladies. They're educated. We work very well together. We like each other. We have genuine interests and goals. We are of the same ilk. And we need diversity. We have that a little bit. We have a new member, my neighbor across the street, and his name is Michael Sweet. And he is very sweet. We like him very much. And we're very, very happy to have Mark Haynes as the liaison. He adds quite a bit to our group. I go a little bit beyond what the role of the Heritage Commission has been assigned to do. We have no authority at all. We're just an advisory and we're doing mostly demolition. But I realized over the years that there's a connection between, we're all under the same department, the planning board, the zoning board, and the Heritage Commission, and we should really be interested in what each other is doing. I find that looking at what the planning board is doing kind of prepares us to see what may come before us or comes before the zoning board. Presently today, I'm going beyond my realm in the Heritage Commission to seeing what's going to be happening in the future, which is happening right now, and that's the Airbnbs and the changing use of single-family residence. I've been through this experience before, and it's one of the reasons why I moved away from Long Island and returned home, and it's following me here. So I just, heads up on that if you make changes, you got to plan for the changes, and you got to change the codes and the ordinances to meet those plans. Because otherwise, if you do it hit and miss, yes, you can, no, you can't, that's not going to be a happy environment. I would love to see new members come on, and I plead to them every time I get a chance. I know they're all busy. We have a sea of white hair out there volunteering. I wish we could get some younger ones. I notice our Congress has a house full of young ones, and I hope it continues into our climate too. Are there any questions for me?
Comments for Ms. Duffy?
Thank you, Deb.
Did you, just out of curiosity, when you say you'd like to see some new faces and some younger blood on the Heritage Commission, do you mean you would like to see the size of the committee expanded? Or you would like to see older people step aside in favor of younger people?
Not just older people, because I don't want to be that discriminatory, but people that are a little more knowledgeable in the field. I think that anybody that's maybe has been in real estate or construction, building construction would be a good member. I think a lawyer would be a wonderful member. Lawyers always make good members. School teachers do too. I just mean we're very nice. We're a very nice group of people, but we're all
Have you
retired
talked about this
females.
Have you talked about this amongst yourselves?
Yes, we have. Yeah. And actually, we've done very well. We've been keeping the positions filled. Where normally there are a lot of vacancies. If I was younger, I would want to be on the zoning board, but it's a little bit too busy for me.
Okay, well, we thank you for your service.
Is there any direction you would like to see us go?
Council?
We're trying to publicize a little bit more.
I guess
Councilor Littman?
just if you had some targeted objectives in terms of properties or things that you're watching for to make the council aware of those things a little bit more specifically, just so.
I'm sorry, Henry, I'm having a problem hearing you.
If we could get some sort of targeted list of what the Heritage Commission has on its radar as the important projects of preservation in the city, that you could maybe come and present to us at some interval. It'd be good to be kept abreast of what you're doing.
We had worked on that off and on, but I'll bring that up at our next meeting, and thank you for that idea.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Yep, appreciate it. Switching gears to the Weirs TIF Advisory Board, Ryan Cardella. Is Mr. Cardella here tonight? Yes, welcome, sir. He's seeking a 3-year term expiring at the end of June 2022. And I believe that's a vacancy, is it not? An open spot on the Weirs TIF Advisory Board. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Ryan Cardella. I live in Guilford. Sorry. I own and operate the Weirs Pier as well as East Coast Flightcraft. Talked to Ava in regards to the TIF committee, so I guess I'd like to see what I could do or how I could help, and it's kind of where we're starting with that.
So, just for the record, Mr. Cardella, refresh my memory, qualifies for this even though he's not a city resident because he does business in the TIF district?
We expanded the definition a number of years back to include folks who owned real estate, owned a business, and/or if they were a manager of a business, played a significant role within the district. So yes, he does qualify.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Cardella?
Just glad you stepped forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was going to say that. Thank you for stepping forward. We need people like you to come forward and do this stuff. Thank you.
Councilor Lippman?
Just curious, how is your business doing in the Weirs? Are you happy with what the development has, the investment that the city has made? How do you see leveraging that in your business?
Yeah, we have a lot of international customers ourselves. We've got a little bit bigger of a following, just exposing that side of the lake. Of course, our company is based waterfront-wise. We're actually in the process right now of a boat show in Boston. It's where I just drove from today. We've heard a lot of good stuff. A lot of the customers, our customer base, they live in Boston, New York, and Connecticut, and we've been getting a lot of good feedback. We are in the process of doing some changes down there for this year, bringing more attention to the Weirs area itself. Also, a couple of projects we're working with about ski schools and growth, I think will be good for the coming season, but overall our numbers are up substantially on the boardwalk traffic, price per head per family, so everything is going in the correct direction. Of course, consumer confidence is through the roof too, so it's hard to tell if it's really what we've been doing or if it's just right timing, but we're hoping it's a little of both.
Yes.
Councilor Hamel.
Ryan, being on the TIF committee, what kind of things out in the future, or things that you can see that you'd like to see addressed, or?
I guess I want to kind of push it more towards involving the community as a whole, make that more of a focal point for festivals, gatherings. I'd love the pier to start turning into a meeting place for local businesses, for some of the things that we do at our other locations in Connecticut. We open the marina up and we kind of meet at the beginning of the season. We do a lot of charity work. It's kind of police first. Fire department and tug of wars, boating races, stuff like that. We kind of want to get back to that. Water ski shows, just something. It's not so much a price tag on it. It's going to be free to the public. We're going to try to get more of all-around events back down to that area, and that's kind of what I kind of want to get my feet wet with and see what makes sense and what we can do. Yeah. It worked well at all our other locations, and I think there is no better place in the Weirs to actually make that happen.
Absolutely. Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, thanks for coming tonight. Appreciate it.
Consideration.
Okay, we have 2 to go, and both of those concern Parks and Recreation Commission. Rod Roy. Rod, can you come forward? Rod is seeking reappointment as a regular member for a term expiring in 2022. Welcome.
Good evening. Yeah, this will be hopefully my 4th go-around with Parks and Rec, and you know, in the last 3 years, my last term, we lost. We didn't lose, but they stepped aside 3 long-term members, and filling those roles was a difficult thing, but we've got 3 excellent board members on there now with us, along with myself and Mitch Hamill, and the cohesiveness that we've developed has been good, and they didn't miss a beat. Artie and Dee and Tony stepped right in, and Phil did a great job, and now as I'm sure you're all aware, with Kevin stepping down, that's going to be a huge hole for us to try to fill, and hopefully the next person coming in, we can help them transition into that role, because I think that Parks and Rec is one of the more important areas of our great city. So hopefully we can help them transition into that role.
Okay, questions or comments for Mr. Roy?
Rod, thanks for your willingness to do this. Thanks for your commitment to coaching the youth in this city, too. It's a really significant endeavor you've taken on, so thanks very much.
I think that's my pleasure. I enjoy it very much. Thank you.
Councilor Hamill.
Yeah, I just want to say that Laconia is very fortunate that we have such a strong Parks and Rec Commission and Parks and Rec Department. The Parks and Rec, with our fields and all that there is right in public view all the time. And it's hard to keep all that acreage we have and everything else up to snuff and looking good and all that. And I think our Parks Department has done a fantastic job with, and Kevin He's been just a terrific director, so, as you said, he's going to be just a super loss, so. But thank you for all you do there. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to comment on your comments in your application, where you state that our park system is one of the best in the state.
Absolutely.
And then you go on to say, where would they go without our park system, and describe it. So thank you for your commitment.
Thank you.
Well said, councilors. Thank you. And last but not least, Arthur Kirk. Arthur is also seeking reappointment as a regular member of the Parks and Rec Commission for another 3-year term.
Hello, good evening. As I stated when I first stood before you, I'm a lifelong resident of Laconia. I grew up playing in these parks, going to these beaches, playing on these courts. My children have also grown up playing on these courts, these parks, these beaches. And I take a lot of pride in this city. And it's something I can do to give back for so much that I have received from this city. So that's really why I like to be on this board. I mean, Kevin's been fantastic, going to be a big loss for us. But I feel it's a great way to give back and keep the parks and beaches safe and beautiful for kids to come for many years.
Questions or comments for Mr. Kirk?
Mr. Kirk, in your application, you said you had budgetary concerns. Would you like to expound on that?
Well, I just in the fact that sometimes I understand budgetary, can be difficult, but sometimes it feels that your hands are a little tied. So it is a concern of mine, moving forward, to keep the beaches and the parks to the standards that we've got them to. It sometimes feels as if you can be a little, hand-tied as far as trying to keep that up.
Go ahead.
Just to follow.
Yeah.
So are we understaffed? I know that's putting you on the spot, and I know some of it's seasonal, but it just
Yes.
seems like.
Yes, I feel we are, yes.
I've sat on the council for a year now, and it seems like every time something comes up about the parks, okay, we just dump it on them, and at some point in time, there's got to be there's got to be feet doing the work.
Right. Yeah, I feel, yes, they are. They are understaffed, correct.
Yeah, I agree with you on that also. I'm the liaison to Parks and Rec and been to many meetings, and Arthur's a strong member there. But it's been several years since we've been able to open all our beaches because we don't have the lifeguards to do it. We've only opened a few. Whether it's a shorthanded of the lifeguards, which I think that's part of the situation. There's just not as many kids looking to do that anymore. We don't even do swim lessons anymore because the kids don't want to teach the other ones how to swim. So it's a kind of a dilemma. But, we might have to look at salaries for this coming summer and see what we can do to keep our beaches open. We've got a lot of beaches and a lot of beautiful area that people would like to go. So they basically swim at their own risk.
That has been an ongoing topic of conversation at our meetings. It's been brought up pretty much every meeting.
Yep.
We try to figure out new and different ways to attract that, so.
Yep.
So it's definitely a ongoing process.
What about capital expenditures? You're referring to, in follow-up to Councilor Haynes's question, you agreed, as I understood it, that there was a lack of operating income to operate the Parks and Rec Department on, ideally. What is your opinion of the level of capital expenditure we're putting forward for?
Well, I think it's, it definitely helps. Personally, I mean, I'd love to be able to see more, but I get it. It's a big city. There's a lot of money going out to different places.
So you're more concerned with maintenance than you are with additions to the package, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a nice area. The parks systems here are fantastic. And to be able to keep that up, it does cost money and people and everything. So you drive in and you see these parks and people notice. People notice. I mean, I coached a lot in my life. I still do, Little League, and, teams come down for all-star games and stuff from other towns, other cities, and everybody is just, they can't say enough about how wonderful and the park is and how beautiful it is. So that's what I like.
All right. Anyone else? Oh, thank you for your service.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, just as a reminder for what we said earlier, that concludes our interviews for tonight, and the election for these various positions will be held at our next meeting. And applicants are welcome to attend, but it is certainly not necessary that they do so. I believe next up is a mayor's report, and two things I'd like to mention briefly. One is to expound upon briefly what was just previously mentioned, and that is the departure of our Parks and Rec director, Kevin Dunleavy, and I can't find the words tonight, Kevin, to express our gratitude to you for everything you've done for us, and I'm sorry to say also express my disappointment, my personal disappointment on behalf of all the residents of the city. We wish you the best in your career, but my goodness, are we going to miss you. And I just want to make sure that, we all get a chance to know you're not moving, or I hope you're not moving, so you'll be around, but please leave with the knowledge that you've been a treasured asset to your home. Other thing I wanted to mention, from 6 to 7 tonight, for those of you who weren't there, and I'm assuming most of the people watching us on TV tonight and in the future were not, and so I apologize in advance here quickly to the counselors because I'm going to be repetitive. From 6 to 7 tonight, we had a meeting dealing with the Colonial Theater redevelopment project, and certainly not going to reiterate that's everything that was discussed in that hour and questions that were asked and answered as far as the council was concerned about that project. But I did want to mention one thing because I think it's kind of highlights in my mind sort of a bottom line on this whole thing, and that is that if the city council agrees to what is being asked of them or what will be asked of them in terms of a commitment to be made hopefully at our next meeting and on into the future here as far as the project is concerned, the city will have invested, if all comes to fruition, the city will have invested approximately $5 million in the redevelopment project for the Colonial Theater. And so the question arises, well, what are we getting for $5 million? And I want to put that in perspective for everyone as a self-admitted leading cheerleader for the project from day one. My attention just within the last week in making preparations for the meeting tonight with the council to the city of York, Maine. And in York, Maine, just last year, they finished construction of a new community auditorium in that community, which is a population of 13,000, so it's roughly the same size as Laconia, a little bit smaller. And they built from scratch a new 750-seat community auditorium, which they call a community auditorium there. And when I reviewed the specs for that project, what I could find printed about it, it was very, very similar to ours, both in size, seating capacity, et cetera, except ours is obviously a redevelopment project of a historic asset, and theirs was a brand new 750-seat auditorium. And the point I want to make tonight is that now that their theater is up and running and finished, it cost them $10.4 million is what a project of almost exactly the same size as ours cost them to build. So if we are able to complete our project, not only will we have a tremendous community asset for the future and hopefully a catalyst for economic development in the city in general and Main Street in particular, but we'll have actually, in effect, gotten a 50% discount on what it would cost to build such an asset from scratch. And in my book, that's one hell of a deal. And so I'm very hopeful that council will continue its support for this project and we'll be able to see it through to fruition. Committee reports. I'm sorry, Councilor Bounds had something to say.
Yes. I don't mean to be glib, but I think your comments are a little conservative. I am not. After the end of 7 years, if we complete this project, what we're going to have in the middle of the downtown is a project that will not only highlight the downtown in a very commanding way, but will be worth not 2 times, not 2.5 times, but maybe 3 times what we put in for the original investment. That's just my guesstimate.
Okay, thank you, Councilor. Committee business. Any committee business tonight? I'm not aware of any. How about liaison reports? Any liaison reports from councilors tonight? All right, we'll move on back to citizens' requests. This time we're asking for citizens to come forward if they have any business tonight before the council that has to do with an item that is on tonight's agenda. Got 2 gentlemen. Go ahead. Welcome, sir. If you can tell us your name and where you live, please.
Good evening. My name is Mark Burrell. I live at 68 Warren Street. Some people here know who I am from previous encounters with me. I'm here because of the Airbnb, the short-term rentals. I have been doing it for 2 years, 3 years now. I watched the last meeting on television, and there's concerns about a house that was advertised as a party house, people spilling out to the street, trespassing, garbage, parking, all that stuff. I just want to say that that's not the norm for Airbnb. I have a small house. I rent one of my rooms out. I have a 5-star rating. As I told you guys before, when the whole issue with the parking came up, I have people from all over the world that stay at my house. I have 0, and I mean 0 bad reviews. Okay, so the 1 or 2 that have caused the problems that have come before you, that's not the norm. I understand from watching you guys last time, you said you want to start regulating it. If you start regulating it, people are going to stop doing it, because I started doing it just to make a little extra money, okay? And that's all I do. I don't do $10,000, $20,000 a year. I'm lucky if I do $4,000 or $5,000 a year. My busiest season, Bike Week, of course. Everybody is busy during Bike Week. The issue of the rooms and meals tax, if I can give this to her. Airbnb, if you have reservations of 184 days or less, in this state, Airbnb pays the rooms and meals tax, not the host, okay? I'm what's considered a super host because I cater to my people and I do what's necessary to make them comfortable. I don't have a very big driveway, so I have the one room. It's only for 2 people. I understand the concerns about how many people are in a house, the safety. Airbnb will sit down with any town, any city that has concerns. If you're involved in it, there's weekly, monthly videos that the big wigs in the company put out to answer questions. I've seen where people from the company come to towns and they sit down, they have town meetings, and they explain what's going on. Concerns for damages. Airbnb has $1 million insurance policy on my house. If something happens to my neighbors or me and it's my client's fault, Airbnb will pay for it. So the concerns of the council, and Mr. Hamill in particular, wanting to regulate it, if you start regulating people and start wanting to charge to come in and inspect my house, I'm just going to stop doing it. If I feel that way, how many other people feel that way? This is a tourist town. It's always had rentals. And as it was said before, now with the age of the internet, people from all over the world come here. They want to rent a place, they just go on the internet and they look for it. It's not like, you know, you were here 20 years ago and, oh, I might know a place. You want to find a place, just get on the internet and you can find it. You know, so as I said, I have people from all over the world that come to my house. I don't have anybody calling the cops on me. I don't have somebody complaining because one of my Airbnb guests is fishing across the street from them. I don't have people complaining that, oh, they're clicking their alarms on their car at 2 in the morning. My responsibility is to my guests. My responsibility is to make sure that my guests have a quiet, clean place to stay. And that's one of the things that I advertise in my profile. My room is small, it's quiet, it's clean. I live in a very quiet neighborhood. There's a cop that lives a street behind me and down the road from me. I don't have the problems that North Main Street had. And to start regulating it because of 1 or 2 people, you're just going to lose it. It brings a lot of revenue into this town. I mean, I moved here 8 years ago. I like living here. But I'm not going to continue to do something if the council's going to start regulating it and make me pay for it. If you want to come in and inspect my house to make sure that I have the proper fire extinguishers, carbon monoxide, smoke detectors, I have all that. If you want to come in and check my house, that's fine. But I don't think you should expect us to pay for that. That's just, you're putting a burden on me to do something that helps the city. My guests come here, I give them places to go, I tell them where they can go to eat, what they can do. That's money that they're spending. If they didn't have a place to stay, to come, they wouldn't spend that money. And that's revenue that the city's gonna lose. So I would ask the council to just tread lightly and go slow. If you want to get a hold of Airbnb and have a sit down with them, I guarantee you they'd come here, or somebody would contact you.
Can I comment?
Yeah.
All right. I just want to make one thing clear to you, and I appreciate your coming tonight. We all do. The issue from our standpoint at the moment as a city council, as a city, is that what we discovered, which we were not aware of when you were here last, was that there was already an ordinance on the book forbidding short-term rentals in the zone that you live in. Okay, we didn't know that. You were very upfront with us, I recall, when we had the parking issue about the fact that you rented out a room and whatnot, and your building and all that. But when the North Main Street situation was brought to our attention last year, we were not cognizant as a board of the fact that before that, at that point in time, that there was already in effect a regulation on the books. It's been there for decades that said you can't do in certain zones of the city, including the one you live in, what you're doing, that it's not permitted. Okay, so it's not a matter, tonight, it's not a matter of regulation. It's simply a matter of what you're doing at your house right now and have been doing is not allowed in that zone. So we as a city council, we're in charge of the zoning ordinance, okay, in effect, the bottom line of what the law says. So there's 2 things we could do about that, not zeroing in specifically on your situation, but just in general, is 1, if the people who live in your neighborhood think that the way their land is zoned now is incorrect and it ought to be in a different zone that would permit such a thing, that's something that could be brought to council by the neighborhood, saying, we'd like to see this change in our neighborhood, and we would consider that, okay? And the other thing is, we could change the ordinance to say that it is permitted in your neighborhood, just the way it's zoned now. We could do that too, but as it stands today, it has nothing to do with Airbnb as a company or anything else, or what their policies is or anything else. It simply is, short-term rentals are not permitted in the zone that you live in today, okay?
So-
It has nothing to do with regulation or charging you or anything like that. It's just not permitted.
Okay, so I say to that then, if you permit, and it's like that lady said prior, if you permit people down at the lake to do it, okay, and you tell me I can't do it, it's discrimination against me, whether I'm black, white, or whatever. You discriminate by telling certain residents they can do something and other residents they can't. There's apartment complexes on my street. What's to say that the landlords that rent out apartments don't do it for 90 days?
Well, and I say he's in single family. I believe Warren Street is on the other side of
I live this side of Highland.
on the bypass side of Highland.
No, I live on this side of Highland. If you go up by Dunkin' Donuts, I live at the top of the hill. Warren Street's at the top of the hill.
He's on the bypass side of Pine Hill.
That's what I thought. It's on the bypass side. I believe that's in the single-family residential district. You can look on the map there, but I believe that's.
Mr. Burrell asked me that question just as the meeting was started, and this is a very tiny map trying to be figured that out, so I said I'd be happy to have the conversation.
I believe Highland is the dividing line. If you're on the left of, as you go up the hill, if you're on the left on the hospital side, it's in one zone. If you're on the right going toward the bypass, it's a different zone. And it's not permitted in that zone.
So are you telling me I'm going to have to stop?
No. May I? I don't want to get into this, and I just want to be clear. Our policy, and it remains our policy unless somebody tells me different or the council says anything different, our policy is to respond to complaints about these kinds of issues. We're not going out and looking for people who are doing Airbnbs. We're not devoting any of our city time to looking for people who are violating the ordinance, and we're considering what we can do with the ordinance at this time. We responded to the complaint that you referred to on North Main Street because there were complaints and was brought to our attention. So, if there's a complaint, the city will do its job. The code enforcement will do its job. If there's no complaints,
You will get a letter telling you to cease and desist.
if there's no complaints, we're not going to search out people. That's my understanding. If I've got it wrong, let me know.
So why don't we just change
Well, that's
the
what
policy?
what we're doing now is we're looking at the whole situation. There's pending legislation directed towards Airbnbs. The council is looking at it. I imagine the planning board will be looking at it. But at this point in time, nobody is raising issues for which there's been no complaints. So, and I don't know where you're zoned and whether you're in violation of the zoning ordinance. And right now, I'm not going to put any effort into figuring that out.
Counselor Chaney?
I think, however, that begs the question of inspection, which he's concerned about.
I get that.
And the question, I think he's prepared to submit to inspection. He's concerned about the cost of that inspection, and that's something the council can talk about.
But we can talk about that.
But as the only lawyer sitting here,
There was a nice word said about lawyers tonight.
to my horror.
We have another one over here.
Yeah, but he works for a living. But what about the issue? I mean, if we send the city to inspect, in an area where there shouldn't be bed and breakfast. I mean, isn't
Yeah,
that
how
gonna-
can you expect something that's
Yeah.
illegal?
That's.
You know, I get the dilemma.
Okay.
I get the dilemma. I don't want to make an issue about it when there's no issue about it yet, and there isn't.
Right.
So all I want to do is I want to move forward with the Airbnb. It's on the table. We've got pending legislation. I don't know what the status of that is. The city council will be addressing it. We'll be figuring out what we think is right. There'll be plenty of public hearings to determine what's going on. But I don't want to go. I don't want to go stirring the pot.
That's what's gonna happen if you start doing inspections. You're gonna
Counselor
come
Hamel, did
across
you-
people.
Nobody's scheduled any inspections.
Let's allow Counselor Hamel to
Well,
weigh in.
it's to go along with what Dave is saying, and I hope with your experience and knowledge of what you do and the business that you have, that you'd attend. The Government Affairs Committee is going to be having meetings on this whole thing. This is in its infancy stage, basically, of what we're looking what to do.
Right, but if
and-
I remember correctly, not to interrupt you, but this has been going on for over a year now. That whole North Main Street incident happened like
Last
a year
summer
ago.
it started.
Yeah, last
Yeah.
summer.
That's known as the speed of government. Just, nothing's gonna happen quick.
Different than the speed of
You'll
light.
probably be retired before we get this.
Different than the speed of enlightening.
I just wanted to make sure, since you took the time to come here tonight and talk to us, I just wanted you to leave this meeting with an understanding of what the issue is.
Oh, I understood it the minute I
The issue
started
today
reading
is
about
not
it.
regulation. The issue today is, according to the strict rule of the law, you shouldn't be doing what you're doing at your house.
Okay.
But
Just so you understand that. Now, can that be changed? Yes. But I think I could speak for the whole council, and maybe I shouldn't. It's unlikely, highly unlikely, that the council would change it just for your house.
I'm probably not the only one in my area.
Well,
that's what I was going to say. If you
But
go
if-
online, there's like 200.
if we had 100 homeowners from your neighborhood come to us and say, we'd like to allow that in our neighborhood, we would certainly take that seriously.
And that's why the counselor's comment about you participating as we go forward is important. You and the others who are doing this need to come in and talk to us.
Okay, so what if it's just me in my neighborhood and you all decide not to do it, and then you tell me I can't do it? That discriminates against me from over here.
Well, you're right, but that's what zoning is, isn't it?
But
Zoning is
discrimination is
saying
also
what you
illegal.
can and can't do within reason, within a certain part of the city. That's what zoning is. I can't build an office building next to you
Correct.
because zoning says I can't. Is that
How is
discriminating?
my neighborhood a single residential if there's apartment complexes in it? It's not single family.
Those have been there for probably
Before zoning, in
9
other words, they
years.
were there before zoning was enacted, so therefore they get to continue. Not, it just,
But participate in the thing. The
Well,
meetings will
it's
be.
every time I come before this board and I participate, people agree with me, and then behind my back, when I come back, it's a whole nother situation. I had this run-in with you, I had this run-in with him, particularly. Dog won't come off its porch, but I'm just not gonna.
We'll just be part of the participation. Just come.
let's see, Representative St. Clair, you had something you wanted to say? I do. Or an issue you wanted to address?
Drop some papers, Charlie.
It's okay, I'll pick them up. That's a big issue. This is the first I've heard about that.
I'd like to express my disappointment that the representative
Is not wearing a tie. I wasn't planning on coming, as you know.
Decorum has been shattered here
It has
today.
been, it has, but I just want, this is the first I heard about the director here. And if I was a rich man, but maybe even still, I'd like to take legal action and prevent this from happening, perhaps in court or something. Anyway, I'm here to address the downtown parking modifications that's on the agenda. I will not be able to stay, and I'm assuming that this will be discussed about after, maybe in a public hearing or something like that, if it gets that far. Is that safe to say?
It's an item of,
Towards the end.
under new business tonight, third item under new business.
Right, but would you be making final decisions tonight on that, or?
I would seriously doubt it.
Okay, thank you. So on a personal note, I couldn't be any more against this idea of narrowing Beacon Street East and Beacon Street West out here. Like some of you, being a lifetime resident here, I've seen a lot of different things happen to downtown, changes. People come in and they say, this is a better idea. Or I remember when we had McIntyre Circle up there, and the rage around the country was taking out rotaries and putting in T intersections because that was the best thing to do at the time. And now, nationwide, they're taking those T intersections out and putting back in rotaries, even though they call them roundabouts now. But nonetheless, that's what they're doing. And I think the idea of making the street out here one lane, it appalls me. And I've also noticed in this plan that we're fast becoming the bump out capital of Belknap County here, where you've got several, according to the map I looked at, several bump outs planned for Main Street, and of course out here on the other street here. I'm always puzzled when we keep hearing about the pedestrian situation on Main Street. I don't see 10,000 people, I wish I did, but I don't see 10,000 people crossing the street on a daily basis there. People seem to be able to get across the street very well. I know we've had a few accidents around here, but if you go back over time, that's just the way it is. So I hope that you really look at this carefully. And I also have Bree Henderson was unable to attend tonight. She had emailed me this and asked me to pass this out to you all.
What specifically would be your objection?
I just think to narrow down these two streets is for angled parking. It just doesn't make any sense. I know we have a potential parking problem here as soon as we get more development with the Colonial and everything, but. You know, especially with bump outs on Main Street, we're gonna. I take it that means we're gonna lose some more parking spots.
What's the specific reason that it
So
would be
I
an
don't
abomination?
I don't like the idea of narrowing our streets any more than they already are. I think it's an advantage. I think it's an advantage to have 2 lanes versus 1 lane. I look at what we did on Main Street down here when we made it. First, we had no street, and then we opened it up to 1 lane. I just think it's bad for business. It's just bad for traffic flow.
Can I ask a question? Do you think that we need...
To your mic, please.
Do you think that we need 2 lanes on Beacon Street East and Beacon Street West to accommodate the traffic? Is that what you
I do think that, Counselor. I think...
Well, that's different than,
yes.
You know, we need 2
rush
lanes.
hour. Yeah, during rush hour, I totally think that. And I know that's come up before, and there's been some commentary on the fact that it doesn't back up all the time. But there have been many times out here where it's backed up at the lights here. Certainly on Main Street it backs up.
Well, we wouldn't change the configuration after this ugly bump out once you're on Beacon Street West and going south. After that, you'd still have the 3 lanes. You'd have the 3 lanes at the thing, and you'd have the turnaround lane for that.
I saw that.
So you'd still have that to accommodate, and that's where there's really any significant buildup of traffic, because I'm not aware of any other significant traffic, and you know, I'm not there all the time. I'm down on Canal Street, you know, so I'm coming out onto Beacon Street East on a regular basis around 5 o'clock, or if I'm lucky, 4 o'clock, or if I'm unlucky, 6 o'clock. But I'm not aware of any traffic issues. So if that's an issue, I think we need to know about that.
Well, it's my opinion. It's my opinion, my observation. But I again, at the encouragement of some other people who come tonight, I decided to stick around and do that. And I hopefully that there's going to be a public hearing on this, and I know you guys will do your due diligence to look at everything. So.
Okay, so I would just encourage you or anyone else who, you know, I'm sure we probably will have a public hearing on this, to be as specific as possible. In other words, it's one thing to say, I just don't like it, you know, or it's changed and I don't like change. It's another thing to say specifically, this is what the issue is going to be.
Well, my issue with the bump outs on Main Street is, and the Public Works Director can correct me if I'm wrong, but from seeing what happened at Weirs Beach, we typically lose one or two more parking spots. So I could be wrong about that, but I'm just thinking. So, that's
Bump
all.
outs are the thing
All right,
today.
thank you.
Along with roundabouts.
Bump outs are what?
Are the thing today, along with roundabouts.
Yeah,
So,
today.
Yeah.
Today.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to live another 100 years, David, so we'll see what happens later. Thank you very much for your time.
I love that wishful thinking.
Anyone else wish to speak to
Safe
the
trip.
council tonight about a matter that is on tonight's agenda? Can't see.
Good evening. Jose DeMatos, 1192 Weirs Boulevard. I'm here for the Weirs Beach Sand Restoration Project and didn't know if I'd be able to comment or ask any questions when it was being presented.
Now would be the official appropriate time to do it.
There's just one item that's been unsightly, and it runs along the channel. It's a wind fence that is slatted, and it has metal posts that have been falling over for a couple of years, pieces of wood that aren't there. It's just extremely unsightly. It's ineffective. It doesn't do anything. And I would ask, I know Kevin's leaving, but whoever the powers to be, if you could please see why it's there. It's not, I think the reasoning was the ocean and winds and stopping the sand from duning, but it's not doing anything, and it's so unsightly. I'm surprised that it's been allowed to stay there for 2+ years already.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else on a matter that is on tonight's agenda? Okay, we're going to move on then to City Manager's report. Mr. Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to just address a couple of items before I get to the report that were brought up tonight. First and foremost, the only bump outs that we're talking about with the Beacon East and Beacon West reconfiguration of the parking are those on Beacon East and Beacon West. I understand that there's a couple drawn in on Main Street, but if you look at the narrative, we're only focused on one at Water Street coming across by the condominiums, one right out here opposite the Belknap Mill, and then a half one, I believe, down towards the post office entrance where that crosswalk is right there. So there are no structural changes for sidewalks or bump outs proposed in what we're going to be talking about tonight on Main Street, even though there are a couple drawn in on Main and Pleasant. Regarding the short-term rentals, Senate Bill 69 was legislation that was introduced on short-term rentals. I did get an update over the weekend and did share that with the mayor and council today about what I believe will be an amendment to substitute in the entirety, talking about being able, municipalities to have enabling legislation to help regulate short-term rentals. This in no way would supersede zoning that communities have in place, and again, it would be enabling. They're looking at things like having a routine inspection to make sure there's means of egress or other fire safety or life safety type of mechanisms in place. There could be an opportunity to have a registry so that someone would have to put a name of who the contact person, if it was not themselves locally, those types of things. But it's still in the very, very early stages, but if folks wanted to watch the legislation, Senate Bill 69 would be it. I know the mayor alluded to the fact that some people may not have tuned in with us tonight at 6 o'clock. Just a reminder, we do record all of our meetings, and they are all up typically by the afternoon of the day after a meeting up on YouTube. So if anybody wanted to watch the 6 o'clock meeting and get some great knowledge of what was shared between 6 and 7 on the funding and where we came with the Colonial Project, that should be posted up live to our website by tomorrow afternoon, and people can watch that at any time. The lifeguard issue was raised tonight. That is a challenge. It's not so much a staffing because we have no funding in the budget. It's staffing because we can't find the staff folks to do that. We're in a very competitive market for those seasonal summer jobs, unlike some other more year-round communities that don't have a lot of seasonal restaurants or seasonal recreational opportunities that open up for summer jobs. So we are in competition. We did raise our rate of pay about 2 years ago for both lifeguards and water safety instructor. In fact, I was looking on a municipal website at NHMA where you can post classified ads, and our ad for lifeguards and a water safety instructor were within 1 or 2 postings of the city of Concord, and our rate of pay offering is, I won't say significantly, but quite a bit higher than what Concord is offering for summer lifeguards right now. I was speaking with Kevin in conjunction with our Assistant Recreation Director of putting together a program of how can we help train and recruit and reimburse folks for getting their lifeguard certification. And I understand that with the gym reopening on North Main Street, with the pool, that they will be looking to offer that water safety certification sometime this spring, and we're putting the final touches on trying to put a memorandum of understanding together with employees that if they go and get certified, we would reimburse them the cost of their certification, half of it relatively early into their job life with us, and the other half if they commit to stay to what we would consider the end of the season, which in these days, for a lot of college students in particular, seems to run around mid to the 20th of August. So we're looking at trying to reimburse and help recruit that way. We're looking to target folks who maybe want to work half days and maybe are at the different end of their career but still have the skills, don't want to give up 8 hours a day, but how can we piece it together with some 4-hour-a-day shifts to make it work? So we're trying to be creative. It's not for lack of dollars for that particular item in the budget. It's lack of the staff. It is a job where someone is outside. Somebody can't have their electronic device available and be pulling out and doing this every 30 seconds because, you know, the job is watching the beach and watching the water and providing an element of safety there. So those are the challenges, but that particular item is not a lack of money in the budget. It's the other points that I identified, but we are open to ideas of how we can do that. I echo the sentiment that you made, Mr. Mayor, on Kevin Dunleavy. I look at it in the positive way. He's still going to be a Laconia resident, and he might be willing to serve on 3, 4, 5 different boards and commissions with his skill and institutional knowledge. I think we can put him to good work.
He could be that new face on the Heritage.
There you go. The possibilities are endless, Kevin, don't you think? Sure. Okay. I will go to my financial and operational trends report that is included in your packet. The top item is our building permit value. That runs on the State of New Hampshire Department of Revenue Administration assessing year, which runs April 1st to March 31st. So we have 2 months left to go. They do tend to be slower months, building permit time of the year, so we are lagging several $1 million from where we were a year ago at this time, and about $1.5 million from where we were 2 years ago at this time. So we are hoping for a little bit of a bump in February, or more likely in March, to get that number up. That is the second component that we use in our tax cap calculation. The first one being the inflation index, the consumer price index, which we have the final report in for that. We know that number is firm at 2.5%. The public assistance data through our welfare office, we continue to be very busy in a number of fronts. I think you're going to see for the first time in several years that that particular function of the city is going to run right up to expending full dollar amount that was allocated, if not maybe go over a little bit. You can just look at the trend of where we are, and the numbers have been solidly strong, especially when you compare it against prior years where there's been a little bit of ebb and flow, and it's not one item. I mean, the economy is strong. Employment is we're at full employment. We just are still seeing people in need on a variety of fronts for a variety of reasons. And municipalities are required to be that safety net, that final place of support for certain items of support. So we continue to work through that. Second page of the report, property tax collection. Again, this year we had the due date was due on January 2nd, so that December report wasn't necessarily an apples and apples, but you can look where we are on property tax collection. We're over at 97% collected, and that's the highest rate when you're looking back at the 6 or 7 years there, so certainly strength in our collection. It's also reflected in the bottom chart on that same page, the motor vehicle registration. Even though we've increased our revenue estimate by $200,000 for this fiscal year over the prior fiscal year, so we basically went from almost $2.7 million to $2.9 million. Again, we're running basically at the same collection level of right around 62%. We are 7 months through the year, so to be on target, we would be at around 59% would put us on target for the number when we're running close to 62. And I do hear from the clerk and have heard for many years that spring, we do tend to get a bump up, and there are in number of registrations, and for whatever reason, there's a number of lease renewals that occur in the spring months for registration. So the leases are not necessarily tied to someone's birthday month like most ownership registrations are. So the numbers we are very comfortable are coming in where we expect them and should stay strong through the end of the year. The overtime numbers by department are trending very similar to last year. There's no surprises on anything there. If I turn your attention, I'd like to go right now to page 5 of the report. Just remind folks that boat registrations can occur now. You can do your boat registration here at City Hall, and we can do it for all New Hampshire registrations. They do not have to be Laconia residents. The upside to registering it locally is more of the money stays locally than staying with the state if you do it by the mail or online, state to online, no, by mail with the state. So if you register local, you certainly are supporting those dollars staying locally. The EMS billing report. This is something we're learning, we're going through. Our numbers are kind of plateauing out for the July and August billables, which are our oldest ones. We're at 62%. Again, in terms of raw dollar amount, if we collect $85,000 a month in actual collections, that puts us on track to where we should be for the $1 million in revenue that we projected this year. As you can see, we're slightly under that. We still continue to have problems with one of the largest insurers in the state, and I named them last month, and it's Anthem. And we have $55,000 outstanding with Anthem, and a lot of it goes back to those early months. So the simple math would say once we work through the issues with Anthem and we're able to collect those dollars, I'm comfortable that we're going to be hitting the $85,000 on a monthly basis that we need. The other item I want to bring to your attention is the write-off column. If you look across for the July number there, what that is are any items that there certainly are some write-offs in there for whatever reason. It was an incorrect billing or we've written something off for some reason. The big jump from last month to this month is because those items have gone to collection, and it's just within the computer system that when it goes to a collection agency, an outside agency besides our billing agency for collection action, they move it into that category because it's gone to that step. It doesn't mean that we're not still attempting to work out collection or payment schedules and those types of things, but that's how QuickMed, who is our company, is billing that. The other positive side to this that doesn't reflect in the revenue side of it, but on the expense side for the ambulance, we are also trending under the $1 million or a little over $1 million on the expense side that we budgeted. This was set up to be a standalone special revenue account where ideally your expenses equal your revenue at the end of the year and everything zeroes out. So even though I've shared with you our concern about that one insurance company and how that's skewing some of our numbers, our expense side is also trending under by a greater amount. So even if we were to come up a little short on revenue, I think at the end of our first 12 months doing this, we will also be under on the expense side as well. And again, if you recall from the budget, the expense side includes full cost of the ambulance plus an additional $50,000 being put away towards an ambulance replacement cycle every year. So we have truly tried to capture full cost of the ambulance within that framework of the budget. Last page of the report deals with the Public Works winter snow, ice, rain events. You can see that through the January we're about 2/3 of the way, maybe a little bit less than that on our expenditures. We are a little bit over in what we internally allocate on winter overtime. Overall, in the Public Works budget, there is $75,000 that we target for overtime. We feel that the lion's share of it, 2/3 of it, occurs during the wintertime when we have snow and ice events after hours and on weekends. But the overall overtime budget for Public Works is $75,000. We just self-target $50,000 of that for winter, and then $25,000 as we track it is available for other needed overtime that may occur in Public Works in the other months out of the year. The one positive note that won't reflect in this is our salt shed is pretty much at an 80 or 90% full level right now, and those expenses were captured in deliveries that we had in late January. So even though some of that maintenance cost may show that we've expended it, if you look at the inventory that's in the shed, we're fairly full right now at this particular point. I can't tell you we'll be the same after tomorrow and Wednesday, but at least as we stand here today, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So, so I've covered a lot of different areas, but I'm happy to take questions on those or anything else anyone on the council may have tonight.
Questions or comments? Councilor Hamel.
Scott, on the fire department, the ambulance thing, with 7 months kind of in the book now, can we, is it safe to say that we'll probably, in the future months, because it looks like it's trending that way, that payments to net charge will probably average around 60%?
Payments to net charge, I'm still optimistic. You look at the top two numbers being at 62% right now,
Well,
the collection. I'm still saying those are going to trend up higher. That means how much of our net charge have we collected? And I think at the end of the day, between some of these stragglers and the big straggler and Anthem and a couple other things, that number is going to trend up to be we're collecting somewhere between 70 to low 70 to 73%. I would say that if we run a full cycle on that, that would be my expectation as to where we are overall in the collection. So the older the invoices, certainly you're not going to see the big jumps to them, but I think in dribs and drabs we'll continue to get a little bit of a trickle in there that will get up to the 70% level.
Okay, and also on the write-offs.
Yes.
Which is trending close to $50,000 now. Who actually says that we're going to write that off?
We work closely with Quick Meds, who's doing it, and we've got certain parameters in place. So in some case it might be an error on billing. We do have some framework in for a hardship case for some residents where it's a true hardship and they're known to us type of stuff. The others, like I say, the biggest jump, some of it could be just an error in a bill, and a write-off could occur for that reason because we made an error and somehow in the billing and we corrected it, and that's how it's reflected. Like I say, the big jump that you saw where July went to 17,000, those items went to a collection agency beyond our billing agency. So a company that really focuses on going after that aggressively and taking action and court action. And
is that more private type stuff? More private insurance?
It's typically for the folks who either don't have any insurance at all. That's probably the lion's share of it. In some cases, though, I've seen some of the reports, and it might be that insurance has paid a good portion of it, but the patient may have a deductible of $100 or $150 or $200 on their insurance that they're responsible for, that they've just chosen not to pay. So the insurance is paid, the patient share of a deductible is not. So it's a combination, but I would say a larger portion of that is folks who do not have insurance for one reason or another.
Okay. And going back to page 4 of the motorcycle week count, 2 weeks ago I brought up about if that was a correct figure, and it's still there, so I'm assuming that's a correct figure.
We have looked at that. I've worked with Glenn. As you know, Glenn's come in new to us right after the first of the year. So a lot of things being thrown at him, but he spent significant time. Pam Reynolds is still helping us out. We've reconciled some straggling accounts. With the passing of Donna in September, certain things at the end of the fiscal year and stuff maybe didn't transfer. I've asked Glenn to look at that 7 different ways to Sunday, and we are confident that that's the appropriate balance in there right now. One item that I would still need to bring to your attention that potentially transfer out of there is some of the trademark dollars. This is the first year that the city went out and enforced and collected the Motorcycle Week trademark dollars, and a majority of that money collected through the prior trademark owner had made its way to the Motorcycle Week Association to support the event. So those trademark dollars were collected and are within that number. What we're going to start doing next for you is kind of give you an overview of how much we collected.
Page are you on, Counselor?
Page 4 of his report, down at the bottom, where it's the expendable trust bid balances, Motorcycle Week account.
So we've collected the trademark dollars. We also this year in the initial setting up had some legal expense for registering all of those trademarks with the city and going through that. And then we've actually, some of them expire at different times. So over this fall, we've had to provide samples of where we are using the trademark on certain categories. So we have Laconia Motorcycle Week and we have Laconia Bike Week. But within those two names, and we have a few other ones, but within those names, there are different categories covered. So one might be for T-shirts. One might be for a category of patches and pins, and one might be something else. So if you're using Laconia Motorcycle Week, you need to actively show that you're just not mothballing it and banking it and sitting on it. You're actively, someone is using it and you're monitoring it. So for all of those trademarks, we're responsible on a renewal basis of a certain number of years of providing examples of those trademarks in use. So this past year, we had to go out and identify, working with our legal counsel on the trademarks. There's certain ones where he is informing me, okay, it's time to, update Laconia Bike Week pins or Laconia Bike Week patches. We've got to go find some examples of those in use and being marketed and sold. So
what is your suspicion?
Well, I brought up a couple weeks ago that if you look back a couple months, the figure in there was 49,000. And then the next month it was 110. So I'm just wondering whether, I'm glad that it's 110, but I just
Well, that can't
wonder-
possibly be right then.
we've gone back and done some reconciling, and we believe that number from some things not being credited properly, and some dollars that were caught at the end of this fiscal year, this end of Motorcycle Week, we believe that to be the accurate number.
What's the amount?
There are
that-
no liabilities.
Yes.
No, we have paid whatever legal fees out of that account as well. The only liability is there.
We've paid everything to the association that's due to them.
No, that's what I was just explaining. The only liability we have that I will be bringing to the council is the trademark money that we've collected. I want to give you the dollar amount that we collected, less whatever legal expense we've had, because we continue to have some legal expense through just recently with renewing some of these trademarks. I want to be able to present the numbers to you and have the council make a decision that.
That's not a big number. I
No,
mean,
it's
$8,000 or
going to be,
$10,000,
less than
something like that.
$10,000 probably.
Yeah,
So-
that's what I remembered, so.
But we are confident as we sit here today. That's what delayed your agenda.
So it's not that this number was an error, the previous number was an error.
There were some things that just weren't reconciled properly to it, and as we've had eyes going through them and bringing it in, we are comfortable as we sit today that this number is solid.
Sounds good.
Minus whatever trademark money that the council may choose to transfer to the Motorcycle Week Association.
Very good.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Someone else had a hand up. Counselor
Oh,
Osborne.
I did. Scott, can you determine what Anthem owes the city for the month of July 2018?
I don't have it in front of me, but I'm happy to get you that number. I know I looked at the 5 oldest months out there to figure out, July, August, September, October, November, and that amount cumulatively was 55,000. But I can certainly break it down as to what was July and what was August.
Okay, thanks.
Is that something that could end up going to court over? I mean,
I probably don't want to say too much on it right now, but certainly some of the insurance companies like you to have an agreement in place for them for the usual and customary rates that they're willing to pay for bills.
Yeah.
So if you think of it in the way of, we know that an ambulance run costs $1,000. I'm just making up a number. But when we bill Medicaid or Medicare, we know the limitations on what they will pay, and that's what we bill. We don't have that contractual agreement with Anthem, so there's no agreement between the city of Laconia and Anthem, as there might have been with a medical institution and Anthem, or a doctor's office and Anthem. So that's what we're kind of running into, and in some cases, insurance companies who don't have those agreements in place, which are more beneficial to them, may drag their feet a little bit in paying, as a way of saying, negotiate with me and you'll get your money a little faster. In some cases, they might send the amount due to the patient, and then therefore it's not the insurance company that we need to collect from, because they can say, nope, I paid the patient, and now the patient has cash in hand, and is the patient turning around and paying the city, or is the patient doing something else with the check they just received from the insurance company? So there's some issues we're working through.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments for the city manager? No? Okay, we'll move on then. We're on to new business. And the first item of new business, which Counselors on page 58, sorry, of your packet tonight, is a recommendation from the Weirs Tax Increment Financing District to purchase new light bulbs for the Weirs sign. Mr. Dunleavy, are you handling this?
Good evening. Kevin Dunleavy, Director of Recreation and Facilities. And Robert Ames is here, who's chair of the Weirs TIF Advisory Board. He may be able to fill in some of the questions that I might not be able to answer. But essentially, at the December meeting of the Weirs TIF Advisory Board, there was a vote to recommend to the City Council to utilize Weirs TIF funding for the purchase of new and better quality light bulbs for the Weirs Beach sign in the amount not to exceed $850. And that's essentially what the request is for.
Questions for Mr. Dunleavy? Councilor Hamel.
I agree. I don't mind their requests at all, but and I brought this up at the last meeting. I don't know what's in that TIF account, because if you look under the TIF balance on our paper we have now, it's $100 behind. I mean, $100,000 behind, because we've been using that money to pay interest and principal on the loan to redo the weirs.
Right, and that was known in the first couple of years of the pro forma we put together on the weirs for the enhancements, the nice-to-haves that were down there, the underground utilities, the concrete sidewalks, the poured concrete crosswalks, all of that stuff. We knew that the general fund was going to be carrying a little bit of a due to, due from until the Weirs TIF, which is relatively new, brought it up in the balance. So you were absolutely correct that right now the general fund is got a due to, not unexpected, of $100,000. And we've got a couple more years in that cycle before the expectation is that the Weirs TIF supports its full portion of the bond payment and then repays the city general fund for the remainder of that.
So I'd like to make a suggestion, because there is no money in the TIF. I'd like to see it taken out of the capital reserve fund at $700, is it?
Not to exceed $850.
I mean, if that's agreeable. I mean, where are you gonna take it? I mean, if there's nothing in the TIF fund, what's it gonna come out of the general fund?
May I ask a fundamental question about that?
Sure.
So I have two questions. One really dumb one up front, because I honestly don't know the answer to this. Embarrassed to say it out loud, but who owns the sign?
That's a good question. I don't have the answer.
They've been fixing it right along.
I don't know if Robert, no, I believe it's City of Laconia. Yeah, the city owns the sign, but I think the Weirs Action Committee, or the Weirs merchants, have taken on a role of maintenance and and keeping it running.
When it was refurbished, I'm going to guess 15, 20 years ago, didn't the Weirs Action Committee leave the effort financially and whatnot to do that?
I don't know for certain.
Have him come up.
Robert.
The only monies that Weirs Action Committee has ever put into the sign is for maintenance and fixing things.
So when it was rebuilt, so to speak, and refurbished, the city paid for that?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. So who maintains it now? Recent years?
The Weirs Action Committee.
So why is the Weirs Action Committee not doing this?
Because Ava Doyle suggested at the TIF meeting that some of them, that the money for the bulbs come out of TIF. I would be perfectly fine to have the Weirs Action Committee continue to pay for this and the bulbs, but it was Ava's idea to have it come out of TIF.
I like that idea. Yeah.
I mean, that just seems logical to me, if that's the way it's been done in the past, that and obviously there's a connection between the parking lot money that comes in every year and stuff like that, and it
Right.
just seems like that's the logical place. Because in answer to your question there in terms of what account it might come out of and whatnot. My concern here is, obviously, we're talking about a short life expendable, and I question whether or not it's appropriate for short life expendable items to be paid for out of a TIF improvement district fund.
I would concur with that, or the non-capital reserve. We typically have a threshold. I want to say it's $10,000, and you usually want to have something that's got a useful life of, 3 to 5 years or longer for that. I look at this as a recurring, maybe not an annual expense, but a certain number of the bulbs on an annual basis. The city does pay for the electric bill, and that is metered separately, and I've seen that bill, and that is $400 and something a month for the lighting of that. That comes in on a separate meter. So the city is picking up $5,000 a year or in that neighborhood for, may not be lit in all the winter months. I know this year it did stay lit later in conjunction with the Light Up Laconia in doing it, but that's a $400.
And the Weirs Action Committee is not broke, right?
No, and we can pay for the bulbs.
Yeah, that's what
Yes,
that would be my 2 cents worth, but.
This has no purpose other than to deal with my curiosity. What's $114 for ground? We're talking about electrical ground or?
No, shipping.
Yeah,
I think that's ground shipping.
That was the shipping
Those
cost.
bulbs. Yeah.
Thank you. I learned something.
Anybody else want to weigh in on this, councilors?
No, I mean, if they can pay for it through that account, that'd be fine.
Okay.
Okay.
Robert, could you tell them a little bit about, you mentioned there was a newer bulb out? Yeah, they may have interest in it.
So the existing bulbs that have been in there for a long time are glass bulbs that are painted on the inside. And that paint is worn off and cracked in many instances. The bulbs are supposed to be yellow looking, and with the paint wearing off, some of them are clear or white, and they don't, there's various problems with the look of them. So this winter, when we got the holiday bulbs, we got bulbs that are plastic colored. So the coloring is in the bulb itself, so there's no paint wearing off. And those bulbs look really fantastic. I think you would all agree that the holiday bulbs, the red and green bulbs that were in the sign, were beautiful. So this gave us the idea, well, why put all the old bulbs back? We'll put in new yellow bulbs that are colored all the way through like the holiday bulbs. So that's why we're replacing them.
Okay, great.
Good idea.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. All right, next up is first reading.
Mr. Mayor, if we could, I think we have to dispose of this somehow, and we just can't, it's on the agenda, it's posted, it was discussed, we need to take action to reject that if that's the will of the council.
So we need to put it on the table?
Well, we don't need
Make
to
a
put it on the
motion that
table.
we not approve the.
That we what?
I make a motion that we not approve the TIF request to replace the bulbs and that they get financed somewhere else.
Did you get that, Madam Clerk?
I did.
Does that do it?
All right.
Do it if we get a
Is there
second and a
second
vote.
to that motion? Mr. Counselor Haynes seconds that motion. Is any discussion? For the record, all those in favor, please raise a hand.
Thank you.
6 votes in the affirmative, that motion carries. All right, thank you.
Thanks, the
All
Weir
right,
Action Committee.
page 65, I believe. We're on to first reading of Resolution 2, relative to the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services Exotic Aquatic Plant Program Grant. Mr. Myers, is that you?
It is. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as we do every late fall into winter with the Department of Environmental Services, and in particular with a staff person by the name of Amy Smagula, who was basically a one-person milfoil and exotic aquatic species, invasive species person. We go through and we identify what milfoil harvesting programs where our needed area is. The state does mapping. We look at the areas to treat. We're looking at some areas in Paugus Bay this year, part of it with an herbicide treatment, part of it using diver dash, which is diver-assisted suction harvesting. So they go down and pull and have like a giant vacuum going through, and they bag it up and take it away. Depending on how many applications the state receives, they have a certain pool of money that there's available for grants. And over the past year to 5 years, the percentage we've received based on our project has been anywhere from the low teens that the state has participated in up to maybe the high 30s or almost 40% the state has participated in. So this year, our targeted areas come up to be just under $60,000, and the state has granted us $14,618. So just around 25% is where the state share is coming in this year. Part of that work will be done in June, part of it will be done in September. We've worked closely with Seth Nettleman and the Water Department on areas of concern with the water intake in Paugus Bay. One very positive thing that we did last year, and I'm probably going on with too much detail for you, but the herbicide used to be a product called 2,4-D. And we would always, when we treated, we would always do water sampling, you know, how far away from the treated area. The herbicide usually has some weighting to it, so it's not intended to travel too far, but obviously with the concern of the water intake. And we do water sampling day of, 2 days later, 5 days later, 10 days later, and make sure that we weren't doing anything that was going to jeopardize our water supply. A brand new product came out that we used last year for the first time called Procelicor, and that was meant to be a little bit more expensive, but much more effective in the treatment, where they put a guarantee on certain areas that you don't have to go back and treat a second year. If it doesn't work, you might have to pay for the mobilization of a team, but not the chemical and the treatment type of stuff. And much less invasive of an herbicide, meaning it dissolves and is no trace, whatever. And the results we got last year, we did 2 coves side by side to kind of give a best case scenario for a test case as we could, and I believe one was Molten Cove, one was Pickerel Cove, so in a general area out of the mainstream, similar acres to be treated at 2 different times, and the Procelicor, 0 trace in any of the water readings was really good, and I know the water commissioners were very pleased with that. We'll know this spring when we go back and look at the 2 treated areas to see how it performed on the milfoil itself. So
you used the old one?
We used one with a 2,4-D, and then later on we used the other cove with a Procelicor and did the separate water. We didn't want to do them at the same time, because then when you're catching water sampling, you don't know which herbicide it might have come from. So we separated out the testings, and the Procelicor, while a little more expensive, addressed a lot of the concerns the Water Commission had, and we'll be able to go back and compare the 2 coves this spring and look at the actual results from that treatment to it. So this is first reading. We'll be referring this to a public hearing tonight, and that'll be the grant, and that's our program for milfoil in Paugus Bay for this coming season.
Question I have, sorry to ask, my dumb question number 2 for the night. This refers to Resolution 2019-2. And I can't find anything called Resolution 2019-2.
I think that'll be the resolution that we will publish and bring to the public hearing, and I agree with you that I do not see it attached here, but it would basically be identifying the city going for the grant in the amount of $14,618 for the purposes stated here.
So can we just refer to it even though it's not in front of us?
Yeah, that's the name we will give it.
Okay, well, I'm happy with that if everybody else is. It's not in your packet, the actual resolution, that's what we're getting at. All right, so we need to pass
I think we need
3 motions tonight, correct?
Yes.
You have before you there. All right, so the first motion to be in order would be to move a reading of resolution number 2 in its entirety and to read tonight by title only. Can someone make that motion, please? Counselor Hosmer makes a motion, seconded by Counselor Hamel. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise a hand. 6 votes in the affirmative, that motion carries unanimously. Next up, a motion would be in order to move the first reading of resolution number 2 relative to authorizing the city manager to sign all necessary documents regarding the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services exotic aquatic plant grant in the amount of $14,618. Counselor Hosmer makes that motion. Counselor Hamel seconds it. Any discussion? All those in favor of exotic aquatic here, please raise a hand. 6 votes in the affirmative, that motion carries unanimously at all. And finally, a motion would be in order to schedule a public hearing on resolution number 2 on February 28th, 2019, to be conducted during the regular city council meeting to gather public input.
It was 25th, Mr. Mayor, if you could.
What'd I say? Sorry. February 25th, 2019, during the regular city council meeting. Councilor Hosmer makes that motion. Councilor Hamel again seconds it. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise a hand. 6 votes in the affirmative, and that hearing is scheduled. Thank you. All right, we are to the aforementioned downtown parking modification plan. That's on page 76 of your packet. And who's going to make the presentation on that tonight?
I'll give a brief overview, and then I'll also ask Wes to come to the podium to handle the questions for you. But this was broached a couple months ago, I think, with the Land and Buildings Committee when we had discussions about the parking garage. We said, would you like to see a concept that narrowed down to 1 lane in each direction and did an angled parking? And there seemed to be strong support to look at that. So that's all we're doing, is bringing it to you right now. There is no need for the council to take action on it tonight, but if there is consensus that you want to move it forward for additional public input, we certainly could do that. The timing of this, if we were to move forward, would be this spring, as weather conditions and street conditions allowed us to get out there and finish street sweeping and being able to apply paint on the ground and change the lines over to do that. The net increase in parking spaces, I'm at the bottom of page 1 of the report, page 76 of your packet. A net increase of 44 spaces, both on Beacon East and Beacon West. We are talking about doing 1 set of bump outs on Beacon West in the area that I know the mayor knows very well, that we probably are going to do a bump out there regardless of whether or not we change parking on Beacon West, but just because that area coming around by the bank drive-through on a kind of an S-curve, and people pick up speed as the road widens there. That's a long cross for people to get over, 3 lanes of traffic there. So we would be looking to enhance safety there this spring regardless. The other bump outs you could see on the map on page 78, 1 full set would occur right outside of the Belknap Mill over here, and then 1 half of a bump out right outside of City Hall as you would cross over to the sidewalk leading over towards Hanover Street. So the cost for 2.5 sets of bump outs is $78,000. We would find those dollars within existing capital funds that have already been approved for streetway improvements. And again, striping would occur in conjunction when temperatures and conditions allowed this spring. You can see we have not, we've only brought it halfway down the municipal parking lot on the Beacon Street east side. Plenty of room for the second lane to narrow out and traffic to get into the lot, to get into the post office, to queue. Same thing coming around in front of Hector's and on Beacon West. Plenty of room where we go away from the angled parking to a couple of parallel parking well before Water Street. And then again, no change once you get through the bump out there to queuing 3 lanes of traffic as you come all the way down past the condominiums on the back side of the Whiskey Barrel and come down to the Main Street Bridge. So that's the overview, and Wes can certainly talk on any of the technical points of this or anything else that I've missed on that.
Did you have anything to add up front? No. All right, so let's get to questions and comments then about this proposal. Anybody want to lead off? Councilor Hamel.
Yeah, the only question I have, Wes, would be the bump outs at the mill, both sides. It looks like it would be better traffic flow if that left-hand bump out wasn't there, because it looks like the cars are going to have to swerve from the angled parking and then swerve back to get into the bump out area and then come back out. You didn't put it on by the City Hall. There's only 1 side, and the pedestrians coming from the parking garage area to the mill area, they would be in plain view there.
Yeah, part of it is we had to do a little scaling to make it visible. So yes, when we get to do the final piece, we'll make sure we have good traffic flow at the point. And the only reason we did the half up by the City Hall one is you're coming across at the corner with Hanover, and there's no really place to put a bump out there.
But that's a good point, and we can look at it. It might even be we start off with with one and not do it on the other side, so it gives the pedestrian a little bit of safety from the mill side, but nothing on the
Well,
other
yeah,
side.
that would make sense, because, you know,
this
the cars
looks-
are like this, so you gotta come out
Right.
further.
So,
I
yeah,
hate to
again.
be an
No tires on the
18-wheeler
other
trying to make that corner.
Right. So, again, it's not
So you
engineered,
track
it's
the
just
trailer.
conceptual, but that's a
Right.
good point, and we can certainly make that accommodation.
The trailer truck would have a tough time going around that, you going over it.
I don't, go ahead.
Counselor Bounds?
I'm perfectly willing to yield the floor to Councilor Lippman.
We're going by age here, sir.
Thank you for your kind comments, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if you had this letter from Bree Henderson with her concerns about backing out from the angled parking, but I just want I want you to have a copy of this and be aware of it so we can address that issue at some point down the road, if it needs to be addressed. I don't know what the safety factors are. I'm not a parking guy pro, and I don't pretend to be.
Counselor Lippman?
No, I'd like to get some public input from folks that are affected by this business-wise. I also think that maybe some of this can be trialed in a couple spots. The paint that we put down doesn't seem to last a long time anyways. So I'm just saying, if we wanted to try a spot and see how it works, that may be one of the best things. I think I have concerns that Charlie raised about what it might do in terms of some high-volume traffic times, in terms of getting in and out of the area. But I've definitely, before I make a decision, I want to hear a lot more from the public.
And I agree on the public part. I think the comment to the traffic, as you think about what comes through the intersection with Main and Cord and Union, it's just a single lane of traffic. So you're really not taking double lanes of traffic and narrowing them down. If anything, they come around the corner by the access to the parking garage, and they get 2 lanes there at that point.
So I guess
Counselor Lippman?
my concern is sort of what Bree is while one lane is affected, if people are backing out and cutting off traffic altogether, that could cause a large backup. And so that's why I'd like to maybe
3 or 4 in the afternoon,
Yeah.
it'll be a serious issue.
So, I mean, I think that's why if we're gonna do it, we should trial it, and see what impact it has, because.
Let's get some public input. I
Yeah,
think
let's
that's a
get
good
some public
idea.
input, yeah.
Yeah. Is it,
So
those
let's talk about, if I may, let's talk about the plan itself as A, and then implementation B. So we have 2 issues here. One, we have, is it a good idea or not a good idea? And B is, if it is a good idea or we're not sure, how could we implement it or partially implement it or trial implement it or whatever?
I mean, I think the reason why we're here is we've heard issues about trying to increase the parking, okay, and in the downtown area. This is an option to do
Well,
so.
a second option, a second issue is traffic speed.
Exactly.
On both those streets, primarily Beacon Street West.
Yeah.
Though I think we've also heard on that matter that the perception of speed versus the actual speed is also,
Yeah, but it's, yes. So my own editorializing, and I know we've talked about this before, is that the speed limit is 30 miles an hour. And 30 miles an hour to a pedestrian is a pretty terrifying speed.
yeah.
So we could change the speed limit.
We could change it.
Is this 2-hour parking, West, on these things?
We haven't gotten that far yet. I assume it would be, but we have not made that determination.
Yeah, going along with what Council Lippman says about maybe we could try it for a summer and see how it goes, would you hold off in doing the bump outs to make sure that this would be feasible before we committed to the whole thing?
The only issue that you would have, and you would have to expect to have us put out barrels or something, you're gonna have to have something physical there to say this is where the bump outs would be. Otherwise, they'll just drive right over it. So you're gonna have to have something there that gives them the,
could
I'll
do
say, a
something.
replication of what would be there.
Do something other than barrels, but I get your
Yeah.
point.
So a question I have on the first point has to do with Beacon Street West. you have the parking spaces as they are now on the west side of the street there. And given the topography of that stretch of land there, my question, and I'm just broaching this to get the issue out there, is that in my mind, most of the people who would use those parking spaces would be orienting to the east toward downtown. That is unlikely that people would be parking in those spaces who are going west.
When we looked at it, we were looking at, in fact, you're backing out into traffic, and you have that corner up there by the Bank of New Hampshire. If you're looking over your right shoulder to look up, and you're coming in on the, I'll say that.
I'm not suggesting it should be on the other side,
Right,
don't
right.
get me wrong. But what I'm saying is, because I think for obvious reasons, it needs to be on that side. But the issue that I raise is that, again, most of those people that would park there are going to cross the street.
Yes.
Okay, and do business or work or whatever on the other side of the street. And so the question arises, how do they get across the street?
They're gonna have to, if they wanna cross legally at a crosswalk, they're gonna have to move down, cross Water Street, and then come across it, basically where the bump out is. Part of the problem we have at that intersection is drainage. Everything that's on, I'll say where the parking lot side is on the Bank of New Hampshire side, actually designed to flow drainage-wise across Beacon Street West to get onto Water Street. When we put the bump out in any other location, we're cutting off the drainage pattern. And with all the underground utilities and everything else we're getting there, it's gonna be awful hard to move the drainage system around.
But wouldn't you agree that it's a stretch to suggest that the people who park in those spaces there are gonna walk all the way down past Water Street or back up the street to the sign where the other crosswalk is, to the bank sign? I mean, I have a hard time picturing that happening 10% of the time.
I understand that quite well. The problem comes in is the actual ground in the space to be able to change the drainage system. With all the other utilities that are buried in there, it would be a very difficult challenge to find room to do it unless we move the other utilities.
To do it where?
Any other location.
Any other location.
Correct.
can't
Because
put
you've
it-
got, everything's underground in that area.
You know, I don't know, and there's no sidewalk, there's a sidewalk on the Hector side, on the west side.
Correct,
But it just leads to a cliff. I mean, there's no easy transit, foot traffic to go down into Hector's from those parking spaces. You've got to go around.
Correct.
And then on the other side of the street, on the bank side of the street, there's no sidewalk.
Correct.
So I don't know what we do about that dilemma, but that just seems to me to be creating a lot more parking spaces there, with no way for those people realistically to get into downtown safely. Seems to me problematical. Maybe it's not.
I think as those spots stand now, those are full-day parking. There's no limit on, there's no
Correct.
2-hour time limit on
Correct.
those. So I come through there at 7:30, 20 of 8 in the morning, and there might be 3, 4 cars that are already there parked. There's a good likelihood that there are employees
Yes.
there, and those cars aren't going to move all day. If the thought is to do 2-hour parking on the street and not have the full-day parking be there, those cars are going to need to find somewhere else to park, in theory. I'm not saying we've decided that yet, but I'm just saying if that were to change.
Well, I think you see what my issue is here.
I do.
Whether you
I
agree
do.
with it or not, I can't see there any way you could put them on the other side of the street, realistically. But that's a tough.
So just a thought then, maybe going back to the thought of do we do a trial somehow, maybe the first part is to look at Beacon Street East and as drawn or something else, and if we just did the bump out outside of City Hall here as shown in green and just the one bump out down by the Belknap Mill, those would work whether we stayed with angled parking or went back to parallel parking because they're both right in front of a parking space. So to even construct those, they would work
Yeah, people can get out.
either scenario, and you're not choking the Beacon West side on that one in particular. And if we didn't like the angle, doing back to the parallel, those bump outs still are viable.
I think on the Beacon West side, where the parking looks like it's gonna go right up to that corner, you'd probably have to consider a speed limit sign there.
Yeah.
You know, 15 miles an hour or something.
Well, that's a state highway.
That's okay.
I think those parking spaces exist there today, right? The parallel ones.
Parallel
further down.
parking exist there.
Those are all the way down to just the curve on Water Street. Those are existing, so those aren't new.
Yeah, but they're not, the angle, they're parallel, like you said.
Right, so we've got the last three being parallel, just again, to try to ease into sight for making the
Yeah,
turn.
but if you
and-
got the car taking up a whole lane, if a car comes around that corner and the second or third car is backing up and he's doing 25, 30 miles an hour, you know what I'm saying? That car is backing out of there is gonna be in peril. So we'd have to,
Well,
you know, maybe not make it so close to that corner.
so I don't,
I think trying on Beacon East is a good suggestion, try that first.
Counselor Haynes would like to weigh in?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The constituents that called me were more concerned about being able to cross by the condos more than they were about the parking spaces. And if I might add, I have a little concern, and I think Bree Henderson brought it up. The parking on Main Street, to me, just doesn't work, okay? Logging trucks, tractor trailers and everything. Once you're on South Main Street and you want to get to North Main Street, that is, to me, it's dangerous. I'd like to see that go back to parallel parking. And I know that we would lose some parking spaces. I'm looking at the safety issue. However, if I might add, I think that this would be a grand opportunity to refer this whole thing to the Public Safety Committee to look at. I'm concerned that the 3:30, 5 o'clock traffic right there as it comes around the corner is just like being in a speedway. And I think if you use those parking spaces there, people are going to look for alternative routes. So we may solve one problem and create another. I look for people to start going across and getting back onto New Salem Street, Fair Street, and then causing the problem with the corner Fair and Court. Most of that traffic, to me, from what I've observed, is just people that are trying to get from the industrial park to 106 and onto South Main Street.
Yeah, and those, wouldn't you think though that those, I agree with you completely as to what, when there is a traffic jam on Bacon Street West, it's because of people, not because of people trying to turn right on Court Street or turn left on Union Avenue, it's because people are trying to get to 106 to get home.
That's why we probably, and
It's
I,
hard for me to picture those people willing to go down to Fair Street and dare that intersection as an alternative.
well, as I've talked with Wes, as long as we allow people to make a left-hand turn from Fair onto Court, we're gonna have that problem. So I think that's another issue, and you know I've talked to you about that extensively.
Yeah, that's a nightmare when
It is.
somebody tries to turn left there. No question. So I guess the question is, let me ask, and I'll get to you. Do we want to have, well, we'll see if we have a consensus to do what you suggested in a second, but I guess the question I have to answer is, would we like to get public input on this issue first, or refer it to committee first?
I think whatever the council's decision is fine.
well, that's exactly the comment I was going to make.
Okay.
I think that if the Public Safety Committee is going to have a meeting, that I would prefer that we get some public input about this prior to that meeting. We could have the meeting, open that to the public, but I don't want to go into it, as chairman of that committee, I don't want to go into it cold without any public input whatsoever, you know, because it's going to be.
So would you make a motion to schedule a public hearing on this matter at the next available meeting that would accommodate such time?
Well, I don't want to cut off discussion here.
No,
but yeah,
it's
I would
okay.
make that
At the
motion.
time.
Second that motion.
All right, so the motion is to schedule a public hearing on this matter and publicize it to the extent that we can as to what's going to be discussed at the next available meeting, I will call it, meaning it's your call as to what would fit on the agenda.
Okay.
For, within the next couple of meetings.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
Are we moving this packet in its entirety, or is the council saying right now we think there's some issues with Beacon West and the one bump out, and we want to just focus on Beacon East with one bump out on the side and a second bump out on the
Well,
same
I would think
side?
if we're going to refer it to committee, let's get the whole thing out there.
That's
and
right. Let's get it
everybody's
all on the
input
table.
I just don't want to have people come down to a public hearing and say something that the council's not already leaning towards anyway, and have people come down and,
See the whole thing.
Get as much input as we can.
all right?
All right, so we have a motion from Counselor Bounds, a second from Counselor Hosmer to schedule a public hearing on
And
this.
the only thing we would strike is that one bump out as was shown right here on the parking garage side. We would just eliminate that, just so that, that point is taken.
Take that swerve out
Okay.
there, yeah. Any discussion on Counselor Bounds' motion? Didn't want to cut off discussion prematurely here. Any more discussion? All those in favor, please raise a hand. 6 votes in affirmative, motion carries. Thank you, and thank you for your work on this.
Can I just confirm, did I understand the manager to say there are no bump outs intended on Main Street?
Correct.
Okay.
We are not touching, this proposal does not touch anything on Main Street.
So those little green squiggly things are just a figment of your
It's
imagination.
the future consideration.
I might add to the conversation, about 25 years ago, I was in Temecula, California, and I saw a sign that went like this, to indicate you should run across the street. I swear. Just a thought.
Are there any crosswalks on Beacon Street east, west right now at all?
Yes.
Yes,
At Water Street.
At Water Street?
there's one.
Well, and isn't there
How
one
many
down
times
by
I
the-
drive by there and I don't know that there's a.
Yeah,
Because you're going too
I've
fast,
been
Dave.
hoping you'd stop several times, Counselor.
Jeez. And I didn't even see you.
Didn't even see you. No, and I remember being informed, since you asked us, because my office used to be right on the, around the
Water
corner
Street.
there, and I crossed that intersection hundreds of times, thousands of times. And I remember talking to the police chief about it at the time, I think it was Tom Ottinger back then, and he reminded me or informed me that the law is that you have to stop for a pedestrian in the crosswalk, but you do not have to stop for a pedestrian on the curb waiting to step into the crosswalk.
So you gotta be ready to kill yourself.
Well, he basically said, if you want to get across, you got to take the chance on stepping out into the traffic, and then it's their responsibility to stop.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Okay, item D, grant agreement between the Laconia Municipal Airport and the New Hampshire Department of Transportation Bureau of Aeronautics. That is on page 79, and this is a housekeeping measure I think we can take care of very quickly. This is nothing new. We've talked about this before. This has to do with the rebuild of taxiway Echo E. And this is a $3 million project in round numbers that the FAA has agreed to pay 90% of. The airport authority will pay 5% of, and the state will pay 5%. The airport's share of that is $170-something thousand, which will come out of the airport's reserves, which currently amount to just under $1 million. So that 178 from the airport will come out of that. All we need tonight is an affirmative vote to accept the money. It's already in Concord. We just have to vote.
Make that motion, Mayor.
Accept it. Counselor Lippman makes a
second it.
motion to authorize the mayor to sign the agreement between Laconia Municipal Airport and New Hampshire Department of Transportation Bureau of Aeronautics for the grant to pay for rebuild of runway, or of taxiway Echo, seconded by Counselor Haynes. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise a hand. 5 votes in the affirmative. You'd note for the record that Counselor Hosmer was absent for that vote. Okay. Was that our last?
Where's Beach?
Where's Beach?
That was our last item of new business, right? Then we have, under unfinished business, Weirs Beach Restoration Project update, page 80. Mr. Dunleavy, are you doing that for us tonight?
Yes.
So that means you got to stay.
Yeah. You're gonna have to show me which one.
Got a big thick packet here.
So I have a handout that I think everybody has got. And my purpose tonight for this presentation is to give an update to the City Council on the Weirs Beach Restoration Project. I know some of you may have not know the history of this project, so I'm going to give a brief synopsis of the history of it, but more importantly, talk about some new items that will need to be discussed and addressed as we look to move forward with this project. The first slide you see is titled A Brief History of the Beach. Prior to 1950, no beach existed where Weirs Beach currently is today. I have a picture from 1906 that just basically shows just a wooded waterfront there. And in the early 1950s, the beach construction started. It actually started further up the shoreline towards the railroad station in the public docks area. And there's a picture there that you can see from the early 1950s. It shows the first phase of the beach. And it further was constructed southward towards the channel early in the 1950s.
So that bulkhead there is not the channel?
No, that's actually probably halfway down the boardwalk, more or less. It was a sheet piling.
Is that still there?
No.
It's been taken out?
Yep, yep. The next picture is, I think it's probably from the 60s. You can see where there's two red arrows showing on the photograph where there are actually two sheet piling structures that were intended to help stop erosion. But as you can see, that those beaches that were constructed, those sections that were constructed in the early 50s are eroding significantly down to the south.
What is a pile groin structure?
Sheet pile groin is it's actually a jetty, for lack of a better term. If you look at I'll go back to the previous picture.
He says they're there. Okay, go back to the previous picture.
Yep. So you can kind of see one of them right there. It's basically a steel sheet piling that's driven into the ground with a cap that holds the sand back.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Councilor Lippman.
So sometime during the 1970s, there were two sheet piling groins that were eliminated because they weren't functioning and they were starting to deteriorate and were problematic for beach users. And then in 1975, to address erosion, there was a study done that called for the removal of the existing sheet pile groin structures, rehabilitation of the jetty along the channel, drainage improvements, and also periodic nourishment of sand, which essentially means they were putting more and more sand to try to re-nourish it as the sand eroded down into the channel. So that's kind of a brief history. I can get into a lot more details, but for main focus is going to be where we are today and where we're looking to try to go in the future. So as there are continued growing concerns about the erosion of the beach, it continues to erode. You can kind of see two pictures side by side on this slide that shows from 1960 and then in 2011. And there are areas of the beach that existed along the boardwalk area that really are no longer there. There used to be stairs that you used to be able to access the beach from. as late as I think 2008. Those have had to be removed because of the erosion. The stairs base essentially went down to the waterfront, and the beach had just disappeared in that area. The practice of renourishing these beaches, which was allowed years ago, is no longer allowed without addressing erosion concerns. To get permits to renourish a beach, they will tell you that you need to address your erosion concerns. You just can't continuously dump sand on a beach and year after year. So that's part of the challenge that we're faced with today. And I apologize for this. I know there's a lot of text here, but I think it's just important information just to summarize some things. In May 2010, representatives of the city and the Weirs Action Committee met with representatives of New Hampshire DES to discuss the feasibility of a beach restoration. Originally, we weren't sure that DES was, and this was based on information we kind of got secondhand, that they wouldn't be open to us on such a major beach restoration project because there really hadn't been anything done like that on inland waters. Certainly situations existed on a coastal setting, but not in a inland setting. DES officials were open to the idea, conditioned upon appropriate studies and engineering. So in response to that, the city secured a contractor that specializes in erosion, beach erosion. A company's called Woods Hole Group, and they completed two sand migration studies. And the real purpose of those studies is to determine the existing conditions, determine and ultimately what feasible options do we have to restore the beach and prevent further erosion. And to summarize those studies, the recommendations were the preferred alternative is to do a beach nourishment project and consisting of 7,300 to 9,000 cubic yards of beach compatible sand. The beach width could increase anywhere from 60 to 75 feet in width. In addition to the beach nourishment, which is, when I say beach nourishment, that means, in simple terms, just putting sand on the beach. Now, those sources can come from different places. They can come from a sand pit, which is not preferred, or it could come from an existing location in the lake, because that sediment has been washed of phosphorus, where upland sources like a gravel pit or a sand pit tend to have those levels of phosphorus, which are not something you want to introduce into the lake environment. So where we get our source of sand is still, that question hasn't been answered, but there is certainly some opportunity, we feel, to harvest sand from areas that are problematic in areas below the channel, like in the area in front of the Nazwa Resort. There's been shoaling that's developed through the years in that area, and eventually will be problematic for navigation, and I think to a degree is problematic now for navigation. There are also other pockets in the channel where there's evidence of deposition, and really most of that sand has come from Weirs Beach. So basically, we're moving sand from the channel back onto the beach. That's an option. Another option is to move sand from a sand pit onto the beach, but that can be, believe it or not, more costly than harvesting it out of the lake. Other complementary alternatives for the project would include targeted sand fencing, which a gentleman brought up today. We did have installed, I think it's been there, it's either 2 or 3 years now. So we put in, for lack of a better term, sand dune fencing that you might see on Cape Cod or other areas to help prevent wind-blown erosion, which is what we've seen, which is a significant cause of the erosion of the beach. Oftentimes people think it's water-related, but wind erosion is a big issue there as well. So that was an easy thing for us to do.
This is the unsightly fence that Mr. D'Amato referred to.
And I think we can do things it probably needs to be replaced, and there's some slats broken, I'm sure, and we could probably make that look more attractive. We may even want to consider something different that can accomplish the same thing that might not be a fence. I don't know what that would be, but there may be some other type of barrier, a sitting wall or something.
It's along the jetty?
Yes. Yeah.
If I may, has it done what it's supposed to do?
We've seen some evidence of it, yes. Has it worked as much as I thought it would? No. But I think it wasn't a high-cost item, so we certainly wanted to try to implement it. We didn't need to get permitting for it, so we just moved ahead with it with hopes that it would have some impact. I don't know if the reason why, my opinion is that yes, it is helping, not helping as much as I thought. Part of the reason may be because the sand particles that are wind-blown have already been blown into the channel, meaning the ones that are left behind aren't as susceptible due to their size or characteristics.
So my follow-up question would just be that as you look at alternatives to this or the repair of this fence, certainly want to make sure the folks who live in that area, like Mr. D'Amatos, have an opportunity to weigh in. So
absolutely,
whether it's you, Mr. Dunleavy, or your replacement or whomever, but maybe
right.
just make a note of that we want to keep these folks involved. So
absolutely. Yeah, so we'll keep that in mind and investigate some other options that I think are more visually appealing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilor Lippman has a question, please.
Sure.
Yeah, I remember at one point, the Army Corps of Engineers actually have some say in terms of what happens with respect to that sand
right.
harvesting and.
Yep. Yeah, and I'll get to that in a minute here. So just got a couple more things on the other items. Other features to help with erosion would be an extension of the jetty to contain the water. Right now, the jetty is what I would call maximized. The sand is at the end of the jetty, and it is going around and has for a number of years, so that jetty is no longer functioning and containing the sand like it was originally intended. That jetty extension is something that New Hampshire DES has been open to, with obviously the getting the correct permitting in place. And lastly, the other type of feature that we would need to, or activity we would need to participate in for a long-term resolution would be what they call manual backpassing, which is essentially after you restore the beach, there's still going to be a level of erosion that's going to migrate down against the jetty, but periodically, every 2 to 3 years, to manually move that sand back up to the upper part of the beach. So it's kind of an enclosed cell that we can control and keep the sand in there. So that would have to be an activity that we would have to plan for.
Could we do that
So
now?
can I? Go
ahead.
Could we do that now?
We could do it now, but I think it's we need to. I think we need to get the restoration done first. I think in order to do that, I think DES would require us to get the restoration done in place before we start a manual backpassing program. I think we could, but I don't think it's going to have the impact that we need. Did I answer your question?
Well, I guess one of the things that I would consider, not that I'm opposed to the beach restoration, I know we've put a lot of time and effort into this, is, what happens if we just do nothing?
Right.
Well,
I think eventually you're going to see, and we continue to see erosion, and the quality of the beach is diminished. And I think eventually that the level of that sand through erosion is just going to sink, and your shoreland is just going to migrate closer right up into the picnic area, because that level of the beach sand is pretty close to the water level.
Yeah.
So I think if we do nothing, 3 or 4 years from now, we're going to see more erosion. 15 years from now, there'll probably be real big problems.
Kevin, can I ask a question here, backing up half a step?
Yeah.
Where is the 7,000 to 9,000 cubic yards of sand where is that gonna go?
Right, and I'll get to a picture of that.
Oh, you have, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, no, that's okay.
I understand why he's leaving now all of a sudden.
I will say this is a complex project. I mean, there's a lot of facets
moving
to
of the sand.
Yeah. It's
Adding that to his job description.
And I won't pretend to be an expert on this stuff, but I've certainly learned a lot about it. The next slide is something I want to discuss because it's a requirement that has big implications for the city. It's really a mitigation requirement, and New Hampshire DES rules stipulate that to compensate for a loss of wetland areas or surface waters, and their interpretation is that when you fill in the lake, basically we're making the beach bigger, we're filling in the lake, we are now impacting or we're losing surface water area. Even though the beach may have existed there years ago, they don't look at it that way necessarily. And when those impacts reach a certain level, you have to mitigate those impacts by, and I've listed a number of types of mitigation that they will permit. One is land preservation, which is acquisition of conservation land easement somewhere in the general area. Wetland restoration, which means you would, if there was an area that used to be a wetland that got filled in, that you would recreate that wetland by restoring it. Wetland enhancement, which basically means you might have a degraded wetland. When I say wetland, that also means surface waters as well. If you have an area that's is an existing wetland that's degraded, you could enhance that, and they could count that towards a mitigation. The important one here that I want you to keep in mind is wetlands creation, which is a creation of a wetland area where one doesn't exist. And then the final option they give is if all those other options are not feasible, then you would pay to a fund in lieu of those other alternatives. And each of those items have a ratio, meaning if you're filling in 10,000 square feet of wetlands, then I believe the wetlands creation has a 1.5 ratio to 1, meaning you have to create, for the wetlands that you fill in, you got to create a wetland that's 1.5 that size. And then the actual mitigation fund item is, I think, a 10-to-1 ratio. And they actually put a value on what you fill in for wetlands. They have a criteria that says that wetland's worth $10,000. A 10-to-1 ratio would mean you'd be paying $100,000 if you choose that in lieu of payment.
Councilor Lippman has a question.
We already, statement actually, on the first bullet is, I think, the way for us to go, because we already have a funding source to do that.
Sorry, can you say that again?
The first bullet that Kevin has up there, the
Land preservation.
Preservation, we have a fund where we've already acquired previously, and I think we're planning on, we've talked about some other acquisitions of land.
Yeah, one of the key components of that is the mitigation needs to be located in the same watershed in which the impacts occur. Now, I don't know how they define the watershed here because Winnipesaukee is a big watershed, but I hear what you're saying.
I think we're like almost all the cities in a watershed.
Yeah, right.
So I want to jump in here just so Kevin doesn't have to be the bad guy politically, especially seeing as he's going to work for the state. But I have significant concerns over this stipulation, and I understand DES has rules and regulations, and I'm a big proponent for preserving wetlands where appropriate. I have a hard time, and I've shared this with Kevin, and I want to share it with you, I have a hard time looking around the size of the lake and saying we need to create a wetland because we're bringing some beach area back to a level it was years ago. And I understand that this is a project that DES hasn't seen of this scope on the lake, and they're kind of siloed in what they have available to them. But I think the fact that we're a municipality and it's dealing with a watershed the size of the lake and many other things I can say, I don't see the value in us spending $100,000 or $150,000 to create a wetland in the area when we're looking at the area the size of Lake Winnipesaukee.
But, Manager, it doesn't say we have to create a wetland. The first one is land preservation.
That could be an option. I mean, it would need to investigate that option.
I'm sure, we've already in advance in that general vicinity made a major purchase of conservation land in terms of soils and all that related to the property that we, the farmland that we put into conservation easement, but I'm sure there are other.
Up on White Oaks? you
White
mean?
Oaks Road as an example. So I think rather than getting into a fight with the DES and delaying advancing this project that's been long delayed by study, I'd just soon see us try to work out an agreement and move forward with it and not make it an obstacle.
Sure.
I don't think we're trying to make it an obstacle, Counselor. I think the folks we're working at with DES are very well-intentioned and are very proficient in their areas. I think this conversation may need to go to another level of, let's look at the big picture.
But I don't want to wait another year to work this through. I think we can come to a resolution, just get the right people from DES and the right contacts in Concord.
That's what I
to
was
move
kind
it
of saying by let's
Yeah.
take it to a different level.
Yeah. To move it along. I think this, as you talked about, this is sort of an unprecedented kind of size project, and it's not like we're taking away 65 feet of waterfront. I think this is a drop of
Counselor
sand.
Collins, did you have something?
I just gave the nod to Bob. I do have something.
You just gave the rod to what?
The nod to Bob.
Oh, to Counselor Hamel?
Yes, he had his hand up.
Just
I'm going to
curious.
speak up now.
Is he even
Mr.
older than you are?
No,
No.
nobody's older than Dave.
You are.
I am. Yeah, we know that.
Is it possible to switch this kind of stuff if we do the dredging in areas that are becoming non-navigable, like in front of the Nazwa? Could we say that we're adding surface area by allowing boats to get in those areas better?
I think I recall when we asked that question to DES, they said there could be some consideration for that improvement, along with other types of improvements that we've done, whether it's stormwater or anything that affects lake quality. So certainly that could be considered.
For the switching of the.
Right. Well, really, you got to look at the mitigation they're looking to have it reach a certain level, and they have a formula for it. I'd like to think they could be a little more, a little flexible with the rules. I don't know if they can. I think they're trying to do their best to meet the intent of the mitigation requirement, with the understanding that this is not a normal situation. We have a public beach that has a strong economic component to it for not only the city but the state. So David, our conversations they're aware that this is a little bit of an unusual thing. So, my purpose is just to convey where we're at with them. And Henry brings up a good point about looking at possible other alternatives for mitigation. And I have to admit, I'm not an expert on the mitigation. I have to rely on them or our consultant to tell us whether, which mitigation is best for us. And where we've landed, because I've highlighted the wetlands creation, where we've landed with our discussions with DES and our consultant is a created wetland. And I just want to show you this, don't throw anything at me, but this is why I want to bring it up, because it would have major impacts on the weirs if the wetland creation concept was a direction we needed to go, or we're looking to go. So the next slide shows a created wetland concept. This is an aerial photo that shows the beach, Lakeside Avenue, and you can see there's a blue line that shows the existing shoreline as it is today, what the proposed shoreline would look like, and it will extend up quite a bit further up the boardwalk area. And although the scale of it doesn't look like it's a large section of land, it's about like I say, 60 to 75 feet, depending on where you are, restoration. And on the left-hand side, between the public docks.
So you're measuring that from where to where?
The blue line to the blue line.
Okay.
That's about a 60.
Out, not
yes,
up.
Out, correct.
Okay.
And you ask, why can't we make the beach bigger than this? This has really been the calculated, our consultant has calculated this shape and this extent as being kind of an area where there's minimal erosion. It's kind of in equilibrium, or as close to equilibrium as they can get. Anything bigger, then it would erode quite quickly. So this is really what they've come up with is through those sand migration studies. So that's why the limits are what they are. That's a mathematical solution to that. The big piece of this is the concept that was I think originally brought up by New Hampshire DES. Shows what they call a created wetland between the Weirs docks and the boardwalk, which is a plateau that's essentially created in the shallow part of the lake, and it would be planted, would have a rock sill or a rock retaining wall around it. It's kind of an irregular rounded shape, you'll see, and it would be planted with appropriate vegetation. And it would serve as a treatment area for stormwater runoff, because we have several culverts that empty into that area. And the thought is that created wetland would provide stormwater treatment to help us with our water quality issues that we have, and it would also satisfy the mitigation requirement. So that is a big piece of. Now again, once that created wetland is in, it has impacts on the shorefront, and anything that may have, the city may decide to do in the future, that has to stay. That created wetland would be, I don't know if in
Would it
perpetuity.
affect further future modifications or extensions of the dock area?
I don't think so. Currently, that area is, I think at one time, there are parts of that could, boats could come in and dock on that back edge. It's so shallow now that.
But what I'm asking is, if we decided there's been criticism that the current dock structure at the Weirs is not compatible with the current size of boats in terms of the
Right.
spacing between the docks and whatnot.
Right.
And there's been encouragement for us to consider redesigning, if you will, and extending the docks there. Would
Right.
we be prohibited or restricted from doing that because of the nearby newly created wetlands?
No, I don't think it'll have an impact on that, because the docking would occur further out from the created wetland.
So it wouldn't just be a matter of this is grandfathered, but you can't do anything to it?
As far as the docks, you mean?
Yeah.
I don't know the regulations on the docks. I mean, I think, and I don't know how they would look at that. I think any reconfiguration of the docks, if they're, I don't know. I don't know the answer, because I just don't know how they would respond to it. It depends on how the docks would be reconfigured. But I think the footprint of the docks and how you reconfigured everything inside, I think that, there'd be flexibility there. That would be my guess. But as far as using that area where the created wetland is shown, use of that area is minimal now. It's just too shallow.
Oh, I would agree.
Kevin?
And this is kind of a general, I couldn't find a good picture, but this is more or less what it could look like. You can control what you would put in for plantings, but there'd be a rock barrier. The boardwalk, the walkway out to the public docks that go down the stairs would still exist. We even had discussions, I think Robert Ames even said, boy, it'd be nice if we could have a boardwalk that would extend from down that lower part as you go down the stairs to cross out to the public docks. If you could extend a section of the boardwalk to the beach, similar to what used to be there, through that wetland, that would be a nice feature as well. Yeah.
What would, excuse me, with the new addition of the sand, what would be in other words, you're going out into the lake, you're gonna go out a little ways and then is it a drop off, or is that gonna be?
No, it would be a gradual, yeah, similar to what's there now.
So not only filling in the beach, but they're filling in.
Right, there's material under the surface of the water that we would be adding as well, right.
So,
Councilor Mounds.
so we go back to the bullet points. I take it that we don't have the option of wetlands restoration to its historic, because actually what we're doing is giving wetlands where there never was one. based upon the fact that the beach that we had got smaller, right?
Right.
So I'm not disagreeing with Councilor Lippman about trying to resolve this. And I don't think that actually the city manager and Councilor Lippman have a lot of disagreement themselves about how we should go about handling this. But I'm not in favor of spending a lot of money to create a condition that never existed. And to me, it's kind of silly. But I don't know what the cost of the acquisition of conservation easement would be. I don't know what kind of cost that would be, but certainly there's got to be some dialogue with DES or whoever we're dealing with these folks about the realities of the situation. And I know that you've expressed yourself and expressed that they're very sympathetic to the fact that they've never dealt with community restoring an inland beach before, so they're kind of in Never Never Land themselves.
I think that's accurate, yeah.
But I think that we should be, I don't want to mean aggressive, but I think we should be very pointed about some of the absurd results that we get from the application of their mitigation of loss calculations. That's all, my only thought. So, and I don't want to delay it anymore. I don't, but I just don't want to get us into a position where, I mean, come on, building a new wetland? Come on. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense to me, you know? We don't have the option of restoring anything because there was nothing there to begin with.
That doesn't have to be our choice to begin with.
I know that it looks to me like the only choice is choice one, land preservation, acquisition of conservation easement land. That looks to me like to be the only logical choice. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's something else there that I'm missing. But
I'd like to.
I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying I'm not going to be in favor of any kind of expensive solution to acquiring an easement. I'm not going to be conducive to at least having the discussion with them about what kind of what kind of foolishness are you talking about in terms of an inland body of water. I want to have that discussion.
I'd like to back up half a chapter if I could and inquire what's the problem that we're trying to fix here?
The erosion of the beach.
Beach is too small?
Yes, that's part of it, and I know it's been identified in.
We can't accommodate enough people at one time, or what's the issue?
Well, I know it's been spelled out in the Weirs TIF documents that was one of the goals of the Weirs TIF district was to restore the beach to some of the original location and size. So there's no question the beach is smaller than it was.
We put $4 million plus to develop the infrastructure of the Weirs to be able to accommodate tourism and better, and part of accommodating the tourism is to have, if we're going to call a place Weirs Beach, to actually have a beach.
Well, we do have a beach.
Well, there is a beach.
Come on, guys. I've been on the council, I don't know how many years now, we've been dealing with this issue, and it keeps on getting delayed and delayed and delayed. I think if we're going to have.
So you're saying the beach is too small?
I'm saying that the beach is less attractive to drawing tourism as it disappears.
Okay, I'm not sure I agree with that, but I haven't been on the council for years and years and years. I'm not looking to delay the project if we're serious about going forward with it. But look, we have a beach. I don't know what we can do about just pulling the sand back up on the beach year after year, whether that works in the long term. Whether we actually have to do the reclamation project first. I don't know the answers to any of those questions. I'm looking to find out. I'm going to keep an open mind. But we do have a beach, and
if we do nothing but pull the sand back up from the lake and put it back on the beach, I assume we can do that without a whole lot of regulatory process. And we just do that on a regular basis, we still keep the beach.
We invested a lot of time and money to bring in the world experts, Woods Hole, to help us study this issue. We've studied it.
Well, the issue, though, is erosion, isn't it?
That's a piece of it,
That's
yeah.
a piece of it. The issue was the objective was to try to restore the weirs in many respects, both by the infrastructure investment and by creating something that was more in keeping with what it had always been, if you will, or had been in the last 40 or 50 years. I think we've studied it to death. We've planned construction of it. That's been delayed because of needing to comply with regulatory requirements. And we can navigate this. And I think the manager says he's got a plan to do that. So let him get to work on it, and we can save some airtime here.
And there was a question about
I'm not, I just want to say, I'm not saying no, but I'm not saying yes either. I'm not saying like, let's just go full throttle here and go ahead and go forward with the restoration process. That's just my opinion.
And one of my reasons of coming is here is we're at a point now where we need to come to an understanding with New Hampshire DES on what direction this can go. Because I don't want to spend more money on engineering until we have that piece. I mean, we're kind of at a standstill with engineering now. We move into that next piece of engineering, which is the restoration itself and the harvesting of sand and everything that goes with that stuff. You know, all along we've kind of been taking steps so that we're not investing in a design that can't happen. So this is where we're at. We're kind of at
I think I agree with Councilor Lippman to this extent, and that is that if there's a really easy way to mitigate this, and it's not going to cost us any money or barely any money, then why would, that's a
And we have-
no-brainer.
We have a source from conservation, what the correct term of art is, from basically current use land, where we're accumulating dollars to buy land, which we've done previously. And so, you know, I'm sure we could work out an agreement in saying that we're going to take the next X number of dollars in conservation, current use dollars to purchase other conservation easements within the certain parameters of the lake.
And I think that's the step we're looking to take, and I think that's the step where I'm going to get involved and continue the discussions at a different level so that we can get the agreement in place so that when we go out and engineer the fix, we know we're ready to construct. Right now, we've done the study, we know the issues, we just don't have the agreement between the parties on board to say, yes, let's construct, and that's the step
So what do
that
you think the next step should be?
Next step is conversations with
We've been
DES
briefed.
to finalize the plan, the mitigation in particular, because as is proposed of, you know, constructing a water element, I can tell you estimates are it's probably going to take about half of the funding that we have sitting there right now, which is around $300,000. And to me, that's not acceptable. We need to be looking at the alternatives. So that's where I think the next step is, and I don't think this needs to delay anything. I just think it's such a unique project that it's going to take myself and a few others getting involved with a different level of DES to say, how can we get this done?
So I just want to make something clear here. We already have 300,000 set aside for this project, correct?
Yes, we've had separate pool for engineering funds, which we've expended.
So it doesn't help you in terms of negotiating something if we're equivocal as a council that we want to proceed. I think we need to get on the record, and we don't need to do it tonight. Take time between this meeting and next, and get on the record that we want to proceed with this, as we've talked about for a decade, and that, I think, gives you in a better position, as opposed to equivocal. We got some councilors saying, no, yes, let's move on. Either we're going to do it or we're not. And I think if we're going to do it, we ought to say we're going to do it, so that when you go to negotiate it.
That makes sense.
Well, I think what Councilor Bounds is suggesting, though, is his answer is it depends on how much it costs.
Well, I'm just telling you that we have a source of funding. It's not going to cost us anything outside of our operating budget because we already have a process in place to fund through current use I don't know what's in that fund today, but it's probably some X dollars, and I'm sure we could reach an agreement with them that said, you know, whatever that formula is, that over time, we're gonna accumulate X dollars to purchase land within this particular region to take care of it.
Well, as long as we're not purchasing land for no good purpose
But that-
whatsoever,
so
just to
conservation-
satisfy, well,
I mean,
hold it.
Let me finish.
Hold it.
No,
No.
you're
Counselor
older, you get to go
Bounds
first.
has the floor.
All right.
As long as we're not purchasing land simply to purchase land, if it's got good conservation district value, that's fine. But, and I'm all for, Councilor Lippman, I'm all for giving the state a certain answer, we're ready to go, or we're not ready to go. And quite frankly, based on the discussions tonight, I'm more than likely ready to go. But I don't want us to go out and purchase land that has no real conservation value so we can satisfy the state of New Hampshire with respect to the aspects of this concept. We've got conservation money set aside for the purpose of purchasing conservation land that serves the city's purpose down the road.
You're not getting it, as we have a
You always
conservation,
say that.
we have a
Councilor
conservation
Evans has
commission.
one.
We have a conservation commission who could make a recommendation and pick out land that's of use. I mean, I think.
I get
Let's move
that.
on, I think we've
I get
spent enough
that.
time.
Yeah,
on
we're
this
not
tonight.
getting anywhere.
No.
You have something final you want to say,
No,
Counselor Bounds?
I'm done.
So my question to the council is, where do you want to go with this? That's, somebody make a motion, somebody,
Well, I'd be happy to make a motion, because I think this is a very important project, though I haven't been on the committee as long as Councilor Lippman. I would like to empower Scott Myers to take the next step and checking with DES to see what the next, and putting together the next practical steps that we should take, not only as a council, but as a city, to get closer to starting this project. I share some of your concerns, David, I really do. But
And
now,
second your motion, because I
Thank
think it's a perfectly reasonable approach. There, you don't need to say anything
it's a
more.
little vague, but thank you.
so who's making a motion?
I
You
did.
are? And what is the motion?
My motion is that the city manager takes the next steps, the next appropriate steps that he deems the city should take in reaching out to the Department of Environmental Services to move this project forward.
Second.
All right, do you have that, Madam Clerk? That motion has been seconded by Counselor Bounds. Discussion.
I think it would help the manager get something done if we were on record what we want to actually do, that we want to proceed to restore the beach.
I don't have a problem with that.
Perhaps we could amend his motion to say the city is ready to go forward with this project and instructing.
Would
the
you
city-
accept that as a
I
friendly
certainly would, and
amendment?
I appreciate the amendment to that,
All right, so
absolutely.
that's a prefix, if you will, to the motion. The city is, say it again,
Ready to go forward with this project.
ready to go forward with this project, and the city council is ready to go forward with this project and authorizes the city manager to, et cetera, et cetera. Right? Is friendly amendment?
Yes, absolutely.
Friendly amendment to the seconder?
I'm agreeable to that.
All right, so that motion's been amended now. Counselor Hamel.
Just a comment. Like Henry says, we've been talking about this for a long time. We've given approval for Parks and Recs to go out and hire all these companies to come here and look at the beach and see why the sand is leaving. And they came up with a solution. And I believe in Kevin's presentation, he said that DES will not allow you to put sand on the beach unless you take care of what's causing the beach to erode first. So that's the route you gotta go first, before you can even do anything, whether it's grabbing sand by the levee.
Regardless
or-
of what size the beach is.
Exactly. And
The
if you
erosion.
go there now, in a few years, the beach house will be in a lake
I'm-
of
I'm-
what the erosion is over there. You know, it's getting close to it now. So, I mean, we spent all these years saying, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead, hire these companies, they come and test. So we're gonna do that for naught.
I hope you hear me that I am not saying pull the plug on this.
I am saying
I move the
go ahead.
question.
Any further discussion?
Thank
You
you.
ready to vote? All right. All those in favor, of the motion's not necessary. All those in favor, please raise a hand. After all that, 6 votes in the affirmative, we have a unanimous vote.
If I could just say a few words, I appreciate your kind words, Mayor. I'll be quick here because nobody wants to get out of here. But it certainly was a difficult decision for me to move on, but I appreciate the support of the city council, current and past councils. It's take a great deal of pride in what we've accomplished since my time here. And so I want to thank you for that. And I'm not going anywhere. Thank you. I'm not leaving. Going to still be a member of the community, and I hope to be involved in other ways. And yeah, so thank you, and I'll be seeing you, I'm sure.
Best of luck, and I forbid you to take that job.
Could I make a comment, Mayor?
Let me, just give me half a second. Counselor Haynes moves to extend this meeting until 10:15 PM, please. That doesn't mean we have to stay till 10:15, but just to give us some breathing room. Can I have a second for that, please? Counselor Hamel, all those in favor, please raise a hand. 6 votes in affirmative, that motion carries. All right.
I'd just like to point out, Kevin and I have had some disagreements recently about some wetland issues. I've dealt with a number of department heads over the years and been one, and it's easy sometimes for department heads to take offense. Kevin didn't, and I want to compliment him for being professional in the way he dealt with that particular problem, but from what I've seen, everything he's done here. And I wanted to make sure he understood that I appreciate how professional you've been.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, great. Last item on the agenda is Colonial Theater project update. I don't think we have anything there, but I'd be happy to answer any questions if anybody has it, or more importantly, is there any information that the council would like to have provided to it on this subject between now and our next meeting 2 weeks from tonight? Be happy to try to accommodate you if you do. Okay, so you have a copy of the memorandum I gave you earlier tonight that outlined the 2 general issues that are going to be coming up at our next meeting, and we'll be asking you to vote on. So again, any questions on those, let me know. And so we'll have this on the agenda as an active item for our next meeting, and we'll get the proposed resolutions to you in writing beforehand. Council comments? Anybody? Nobody? All right, no need for a non-public tonight. All right, I'm going to declare then the meeting adjourned at 9:59 PM.
I want to go home.
Didn't seem.
Let's make a decision tonight.
Oh, you got a new one?
I'm just waiting for you to make a decision.